All right, we are live. Welcome, Jonah. Welcome, everybody.
Hello.
Yeah, it's nice to be on the Q&A. Technically, we've done 2 this month because last month was a little late, but it's really great to be here. Full disclosure for anybody who sees this later, I casually got up to date on my vaccines yesterday, and I didn't think about this live stream, and I could be doing better, so I might be zoning out here and there, but I'm going to try my best today. Jonah had to call me
All
before
right.
the live stream to make sure I was awake.
Yeah, this will be fun.
But yeah, so we have a pretty normal month for all of you today. So we're going to start by going through some stories that we wanted to chat about and put on your radar. We have Bitwarden, WordPress, Google opening up third-party app stores, AAA gaming on Asahi Linux, a new task management thing I found, which is pretty cool. And then we have, accidentally X'd out. Then we have our questions on our forum and also on our Patreon. And we have some XMR chat stuff, and then we're going to open it up to all of you. So feel free to start leaving your questions now, and we'll get to it afterwards in the live chat. Did I miss something? I feel like I missed like 10 things.
It's probably fine.
Okay.
We'll go with that.
Okay. So do you want to start by giving a quick breakdown on the Bitwarden situation?
Yeah, so what happened was recently some people who were trying to build the open source Bitwarden client noticed that they weren't able to build it from source anymore without agreeing to some license terms and downloading something that looked like a proprietary component of Bitwarden. So there was a big story about how Bitwarden is including more proprietary components under more closed source licensing that they control, where you can only use that code with like Bitwarden specific apps and not in like other implementations, which is obviously not open source. So people were understandably very concerned about that. What ended up happening is Bitwarden recognized that that specific build error was a bug. It's supposed to be able to build with only open source code. So they are, I believe they fixed it. I don't remember if they have fixed it or they just said they're going to fix it. But either way, that component of the whole thing is pretty much resolved. You should still be able to build the client with open source code, that kind of thing. So ultimately, it's just kind of a story about like Bitwarden and their funding. They have to like do more enterprisey things to make money. They are, I mean, for a long time, Bitwarden has had like this open core model. It's very similar to like GitLab, for example. They haven't been like fully open source in all of the things that they do for a while now. I think even possibly even before the VC funding, but certainly after. So it's just how their business is structured, and it's not super new, but I guess I've seen a lot of people in the communities concerned about like whether Bitwarden is going to go completely closed source or if they're going to have to move, and I don't think that that's going to be the case for a lot of consumers in their base product right now.
Right. Yeah, from what I could tell too, it seems like a big licensing disagreement, which I don't know. How do you feel about that in the context of companies like Vivaldi? Because my stance on it is, at least from a pure privacy and security perspective, I don't see a direct issue in someone being source available. And the whole like open source versus source available argument really boils down to an argument of what FOSS should mean. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's certainly one argument. And from like a security perspective, I'd agree, like having that source available is going to be the biggest thing in order to like make sure the current product as it exists today is secure and people can audit it. Personally, I think that vendor lock-in is a huge like privacy concern because we see time and time again a lot of companies like create products that work fine for now and then become more privacy invasive later, and you can't really switch because you're already on this platform. The switching cost is too high for a lot of people, and so they're kind of stuck. And so uh, I think that being open source and being able to easily switch to like a new open source fork if something goes wrong with the original product is actually directly relevant to privacy. So it is kind of a concern. I do think like in this specific case, the vast majority of Bitwarden code, at least the part that like most people in this community would care about, is open source right now. So that means that like if Bitwarden decides to do something crazy, the community can take the code as it is. They won't be able to use future code, but they can't change the license of the old code retroactively. So they can take it and fork it and make something open source and have some continuance no matter what Bitwarden does. So I think there is still some assurance there for people who are using Bitwarden right now who are concerned about that open source licensing provides that source available license might not necessarily.
Right. Yeah, definitely made the rounds, and I know a lot of people were really worried about this one because I know Bitwarden is probably one of, if not the most popular, like open source password manager recommendation right now. So
Yeah.
yeah. Is there any update? To my knowledge, they kind of mostly resolved most people's concerns at this point.
Yeah, I think everything's been resolved for now. I think people are just worried about like it's the same stuff that we were talking about when Bitwarden got their VC funding originally. Like
Yeah.
people are concerned about the direction, but
So
for
fair.
now I think it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this one is probably something you're more familiar with as somebody who's never used WordPress. So I know I just asked for the breakdown on the Bitwarden one, but I'll do the next one.
Well, I'll do the WordPress one too. Yeah, that one I've been following a lot on Mastodon because I follow a lot of like writers and journalists, and a lot of people have their personal blogs on WordPress still, or know people who do. It's used by over 40% of the web or something crazy like that right now, this single platform. So this kind of affects a lot of people. This was like beginning of October, I believe, or end of September, where um, basically WordPress and this hosting company called WP Engine have gotten into this legal battle over trademarks, and it's gotten really messy and really dramatic. And it's a really complicated situation too, because it turns out WordPress has this incredibly complex like corporate structure. It's very Byzantine. It's worse than Mozilla, honestly. It's like just ridiculously confusing. So there's like a lot of different entities involved, but basically what it comes down to is WordPress is developed by this foundation called the WordPress Foundation. And WordPress is also a product on WordPress.com that's sold by a company called Automatic. And this person named Matt Mullenweg is in charge of both of these entities. And he also is the personal owner of the domain WordPress.org and WordPress.com, separately from these companies. So he kind of pretty much controls everything, even though technically it's supposed to be like this open source project and community run. There's no community governance involved in WordPress at all, basically. So he can kind of do whatever he likes. And what he's decided is that WP Engine is kind of making too much money from hosting WordPress, and he's not getting what he thinks is a fair cut of that. So he's kind of taking this scorched earth approach to locking everything WP Engine related out of the WordPress ecosystem. And I guess there's a security relevant part to this, which is that most recently, I believe, WordPress has taken over this plugin that's been developed by WP Engine that's very popular and used across a lot of different WordPress installs, and they've replaced it with a fork that's developed by Automatic, Matt's company, with like a slightly different name. But that's pretty much the first time that that's been happened, and all of people's like existing installs get updated to this fork automatically because they're getting their updates from the WordPress.org plugin repository. So a lot of people are treating this as like kind of a supply chain attack at this point, where like WordPress is now this organization that is sending code that you didn't ask for to your installs and potentially changing all of your installations to this new code that they made just because they don't like WP Engine. Um, it's just a ridiculous situation. It's very petty on WordPress's end, I think, at the end of the day, because WP Engine hasn't really done anything wrong. They've sponsored all of these events. I think they might have even sponsored the event where Matt Mullenweg first called them out on the keynote. And they seem to do a lot in the WordPress community. And more importantly, they're not really in violation of any of WordPress's trademark policies that they had, even though Matt claims otherwise. So it's just a lot of drama, basically.
Yeah, how does this impact anybody who doesn't care about WordPress? Myself
It's just the
included.
main thing is like because so many sites run WordPress and so many WordPress sites are hosted on WP Engine, there's a lot of potential security issues that are going to be cropping up if WP Engine websites aren't able to get updates, for example, or if WordPress is going to change the code of WP Engine customers to something automatic related. You never know like what development team is behind that. It's totally shifting like who you're trusting in for your website. So it's a concern for all of these sites that run WordPress, and that's something that's done by like a lot of small business owners, especially, and a lot of other people. But I don't know.
Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. It doesn't
Yeah.
sound like there's much of a resolution yet here.
No, as far as I know, they're having some court hearings in at the end of November, so that's probably the first time there will be some legal resolution unless they settle it earlier. But they're just kind of battling it out right now.
Hmm. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a good breakdown. If anyone has more questions, leave them. And that is something that Joan is a lot more familiar with than I am.
Hmm.
In the next story, in Epic's battle to make all big tech companies a little bit better, um, Google must crack open Android for third-party stores. And this is because of the Epic Games lawsuit against Google. And so Google's Android App Store has been deemed an illegal monopoly, and that's going to have to change, which effectively opens up the Google Play Store to competition for at least 3 years. Um, Also, the really interesting thing here is Google has to distribute rival third-party app stores within Google Play. So
Oh, interesting.
you don't even have to get F-Droid from its website, for example. You can get F-Droid theoretically from the Google Play Store, which actually could be really cool and like open up like the availability of these things a lot more. Um, so here's kind of the full list. Google must stop requiring Google Play billing for apps distributed on the Google Play Store. Let Android developers tell users about other ways to pay from within the Play Store. Let Android devs link to ways to download their apps outside of the Play Store. And let Android developers set their own prices for apps irrespective of Play billing. Google also cannot share app revenue with any person or entity that distributes Android apps, offer developers money or perks to launch their apps on the Play Store, offer developers money or perks not to launch their apps on rival stores, and offer device markers or carriers or perks to pre-install the Play Store. There's a little bit more context here, but I'd say that's kind of the general story, which is that Google is now being forced to really open up to third-party app stores on Android. This is huge. And yeah, Tim Sweeney here from Epic is doing a lot of good stuff. I guess I'm curious why it was so much easier to get like a nice ruling for Google, whereas Apple has all this BS stuff that it seems like Apple's been able to finesse these lawsuits a little bit better than Google, because Apple's version of opening up the third-party app stores comes down to, we'll allow third-party app stores in these regions, and we're going to charge a tax to people outside of that, and we also won't let them list on the App Store itself, and all these really random restrictions that are clearly designed to disincentivize it completely. But this actually reads like a usable, solid thing to do. It's
Yeah,
exciting.
it's very cool. The main thing I'm wondering about is it was like a year or two ago, I think we talked about Google Play requiring developers to use like keys stored in the cloud rather than like locally signed keys for their app builds that are distributed on the Play Store, at least for new apps. And I wonder if that would prevent someone like F-Droid, for example, from distributing on the Play Store, and if they would have to change that policy at all. Because I don't think F-Droid would be open to like offloading their signing capabilities and distributing what's technically a different version of the app on the Play Store versus the rest of the F-Droid ecosystem. So um, I'm interested to see how that would work out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really exciting stuff though. I'm excited to see that. And Android's always kind of like up and down. We've been seeing a lot of stories recently that might actually scare a lot of people from the platform,
Yeah.
because they seem very anti I guess, custom ROM anti-third-party app store, but that one is completely in the opposite direction. So yeah,
I
we'll see.
almost wonder too if this will convince Google to maybe refocus more of their development efforts on like Android open source project code rather than like bundling everything with Google Play services, because they're not going to have like that stranglehold on the Android ecosystem anymore. Because that's been one of my biggest issues with Android for a long time, is that they've kind of shifted all of their development off of the open source project itself, and there aren't really good apps that are bundled. They don't even like develop the dialer and messenger app anymore. It's that crazy.
Right. Um, the next story is pretty exciting. So for people who aren't up to date on this, we only have 2 more stories, and then we're going to get into the formal Q&A.
Yeah.
Asahi Linux is essentially a way to install Linux on Mac devices. And it's very alpha. I think it's formally an alpha. Either way, I'm going to call it an alpha because a lot of things don't work. Like I think some devices still doesn't support the webcam or mics. There's just random things that won't work. But it's super cool. And then Fedora picked it up as an official Fedora spin. So Fedora Asahi Linux is officially something you can install on Mac devices now. And you can use Linux on Mac hardware. This is kind of an update here where Asahi Linux now ships with OpenGL, OpenCL, and Vulkan drivers for hardware. So that means that you can do things like AAA gaming with Linux on Mac hardware. Who thought that you would need to find a way to install Linux on a MacBook to finally get AAA gaming on a MacBook?
Yeah, that's exciting stuff, and that's a pretty big accomplishment for the Asahi Linux team, because they're basically working with like this black box GPU that Apple is not providing them any support for. So reverse engineering all of this and getting solid GPU support out of Apple Silicon is exciting stuff.
Yeah, no, it's super exciting, and I'm going through the screenshots here, but it looks like it's genuinely playing. Well, it's here. Many games are playable. Newer AAA titles don't hit 60 FPS yet. But I think that's a pretty high standard. I mean, there's still a lot of emulators for things like the PS3 that don't do that.
Yeah.
Like a lot. At least last time I checked, the PS3 emulator didn't do well with certain games trying to hit full speed. But it seemed like really picky with the games. So I don't know. But I don't know. I'm excited for this, mainly because I think it would be awesome to run Fedora on like Apple hardware. I think that's kind of like the best of a lot of worlds right now, especially with Apple Silicon at the moment, which kind of blows everything else out of the water. Which, when are people going to catch up? I know Microsoft released that new device that they said should outperform the Apple's chips. I don't know if you've seen that.
I'm not sure, but I know Qualcomm is releasing like their Elite X chips, their Snapdragon chips for laptops, and those have been out for a while, but it's only like Linux support isn't great for that. On that side of things, Qualcomm is supposedly working to improve Linux support themselves. So we're hoping like maybe the first half of next year, like Linux support will be good and there will be good viable ARM options. But as far as I know, those chips are fairly performant and should be a good alternative if you could run anything but Windows on them right now. So it's kind of, yeah, all of this Asahi development stuff is pretty exciting for me because it's kind of like a race right now between like, am I going to get Linux on my MacBook or is Qualcomm going to beat them and I'll get Linux on like a ARM ThinkPad or something, but I don't know how that'll work out. It's kind of like whatever's first at this point.
Yeah,
But
honestly,
neither are quite there yet for me.
I'd put my money on Asahi. If they got gaming going with AAA titles, that's pretty exciting, and I think they're probably not far off from cracking a lot of things. I do think it's interesting how they have AAA gaming going before things like all hardware functioning on the MacBook Pro.
As far as I know, it's just I think it's still the microphone, but I think everything else works.
Yeah, let me check.
But now I'm curious.
Yeah, I'll pull it up here. Asahi Linux. Keep leaving your questions, everybody. We just have one more story here to talk about, and then we're going to get into the Q&A. So feel free to keep leaving questions in the live chat. Let's see here.
I know for a very long time microphone was like the only thing that I really cared about. I think Thunderbolt also might not work yet, but I don't use any Thunderbolt devices.
Yeah, so the microphone, Touch ID, Thunderbolt, and USB-C displays. So those are killers for me because like right now I'm hooked up to a docking station with two, Thunderbolt monitors
Yeah.
behind this camera here. Yeah, definitely no go.
So close though.
Yeah.
Hopefully they can work that stuff out.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty
I
important,
want.
especially for something like the Mac Mini or the Mac Studio. A lot of people use Thunderbolt or USB-C displays. So I think that's something that it is a priority, I have to assume, because that's pretty important for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I
think the last thing you're using a new to-do app is what I heard. Lunatask, I think.
Yeah, okay. It's not just a to-do app. So,
okay. Oh, sounds like you have a lot to say.
This requires some context. So I've been using Todoist for a long time because frankly, there's nothing better. I will die on the hill that things is well below Todoist in really anything. But what I really didn't like was that I felt like a lot of these things in my life that were part of my daily routines should have been in the same place. So I journal in Crypty. I keep track of my calendar in my calendar, and then I keep track of my to-do list on Todoist. But these all felt like the same thing. It was all part of the same workflow. And so in my head, I was like, well, I wish there was something that just combined all of it in one place, no? And everyone kept recommending Notion. And let me tell you, I tried Notion, and it was awful. I am convinced that there might be like 1 in 100 people who actually use Notion properly because it's so complicated, it's so advanced, and I realized very quickly that to set it up the way I wanted it set up, it would be a full-time job practically.
Notion is really like the modern version of Microsoft Excel. I feel like in the 2010s, it was like very common for like entire businesses to be run entirely in Excel spreadsheets because people just had the most incredibly complex formulas to do everything. This is like a common thing that I heard among office workers. And now it's like Notion is also trying to be this do everything app.
And it doesn't do it. It sucks at everything.
Like crazy.
Like, I don't know, like it wasn't better than Todoist as a to-do list program. It wasn't better than my calendar to check my events and keep up with things. It wasn't better than my journaling app for journaling. It tries to do everything and it kind of falls short in every place. And you kind of have to use hacky workarounds for a lot of things. So I actually don't get the Notion hype. Anyway, where this led was I kind of made the assessment that this doesn't exist. There is no app that can do everything and bring your life into one place. That's what I thought until I found Lunatask. I am not associated with Lunatask. I just love it. Someone brought it up on our forum, so I learned about this on our forum. Pretty much Lunatask has notes, habits, to do, and things like you can link it to your calendar, so you can see your calendar, drag over your tasks. It automatically, it uses different... So one tough thing about Todoist is I have like my personal life, I have Techlore, I have Cake Wallet, I have like relationships that I have with people, and I try to keep track of that within different projects. But it takes so much time for me to organize and prioritize things properly, if that makes sense. Like I don't know how to, if I have 20 things to do in a day, how do I pick which ones to start with? And so every day it's this whole thing of like, okay, well, I need to put half an hour into just deciding what to do. Lunatask actually is like intelligent enough to see how you prioritize things, and it actually suggests it for you. And within each area of your life, you can have it categorized differently, because one issue I was having was for work, something like, a plan by the week thing was really good for Techlore. Like these are the 3 things I want to do each day of this week. But that didn't work well for my personal life. My personal life, just having a long priority-based list was the best thing. You can do that in Lunatask. You can set like different, it has built-in Eisenhower matrix support. You can change different things. It's all end-to-end encrypted. I've been using it for habit tracking because honestly, I don't know why not every to-do program has habits integrated within it. It's the same thing. It's just a different interface for a similar concept. So it also has a lifetime purchase option, which I have not purchased yet because I'm still playing with it. But it's been, over a week since I made this post on Mastodon, and I'm in love. and I'm probably going to cancel my Todoist. The only thing it's not good for is because it's end-to-end encrypted, it's not good for collaborative stuff. So I still have Todoist for the Techlore project because that's what I use to like do things with our editor. Ideally Jonah, but Jonah never logs in. So we don't use Todoist with Jonah. But yeah, it's been awesome. I don't know if you tried it.
That's exciting. I think it's clear I'm not as into to-do list apps as you. I don't know all these things like Eisenhower matrices or stuff like that. This seems very complex, but I'm glad that it works for you.
Yeah.
And yeah, one of you watching, remember to ask for the November live stream if it's still going well for Henry. We'll see if the honeymoon period wears off after
Yeah.
this week, or if you're still going strong next month.
I honestly don't think, and again, like there always is a honeymoon period when you try new workflows.
Yeah.
This one just feels very different than that. It feels like, oh my gosh, this is what I've wanted for so long that just never existed. Heads up, it is not open source. But the way I'm looking at it is what is the open source alternative to this? There is none. I can't even find a good cross-platform open source to-do app that just keeps a basic to-do list that I can't self-host myself. Like I know Synology has one, but it's kind of garbage. And then I don't want to have to spin up Nextcloud just for to-do and productivity. So anyway, Lunatask, awesome. It's cross-platform. You can get on Android. A web app is supposedly like in their idea list. It is not open source. I wish it was, but that's also on their idea list. But also, again, I kind of fight back on people a little bit because it's like, what is the open source alternative to this? At the end of the day, every mainstream provider that offers something similar doesn't even offer end-to-end encryption, and this does. So that's a big upgrade in my eyes. And the last thing I'll say, does not work with lockdown mode. You can't log in on iOS with lockdown mode. So you have to disable lockdown mode, put in your encryption key, and then re-enable lockdown mode. And that's because it uses some kind of web technology to like process the decryption key.
Interesting.
Yeah, I reached out to their support,
strange.
and they added it to their official documentation. So you should be able to find that in their documentation now because I bugged them about it.
Well, hopefully they fix that. Yeah, not open source is a bummer, but end-to-end encryption I think is huge, and that's also a thing that you don't really see with, I mean, like Todoist and obviously apps like Notion, for example. So huge benefit for Lunatask there.
Yeah, it's nice. Highly recommend. And now, actually, there is one more thing. I put this thing down in my note to self, which is, we were talking about Apple. Apparently, Apple just released new MacBooks, but I got up to date with my vaccines yesterday, and I was like sleeping before this live stream, just trying to survive for this live stream. Apparently there was new MacBooks, but I actually had something in my Signal note to self I was going to talk to you about, which is I feel like Apple's hardware has been kind of nosediving a little bit recently, or just staying stagnant, which is fine. But I feel like they've committed to, I don't know if they've committed, but I've been seeing a lot of talk about them moving to 2-year upgrade cycles for some of their devices. It seems like things are really starting to stagnate. I feel like the laptop era is kind of come to the mobile era, if that makes sense, where we're just seeing tiny changes. And I feel like that's bad news. And the reason for that being, we've always said that one of the reasons why Apple can be a better tech company than most of the others is because they sell hardware and that's their main way of making money. So if that whole side of things starts to slow down, will we start seeing more exploitive practices from Apple on the software side of things? Is kind of the hypothetical I wanted to throw your way.
Yeah, and that is concerning. I kind of don't see Apple switching to a 2-year release cycle, just because it would require the entire industry to do that as well. Otherwise, Apple would be like left behind, I think, in terms of just like mind share, right? If Apple goes a whole year without announcing like a new Mac, for example, I don't know if people will still be as interested in that. Certainly, you don't have to upgrade every year anymore, and people will spend more time between upgrades. I'm still on my M1 Pro MacBook Pro, for example, and this is probably the longest I've ever used a single laptop, and I've no desire to upgrade even now because it's almost too good, which is definitely a big concern.
MKBHD 2, I think, still has the original M1 And he said
Yeah.
in his podcast, I don't have any desire to upgrade. So
Yeah, so I think Apple can still, there's still things that Apple could improve about their products that I think will make for more enticing upgrades, even if it's not like Apple Silicon performance upgrades or that kind of thing. The biggest thing this year is that they finally upgraded the base RAM across the board on their Mac lineup to 16 gigs. So like they can do stuff like that. They can do stuff like new display technology, for example. They're like the new OLED displays in the iPad. If they put that in a MacBook Pro, that would be a pretty enticing upgrade, I think. So I think Apple still has some ways to like continue innovating just outside of like performance and specs as far as their designs go. But yeah, I mean, I think all of the hardware stuff is kind of slowing down right now because a big part of that is like things being offloaded to the cloud too. And Apple seems to be jumping on that train with their private compute for Apple Intelligence, for example, which is kind of a shame. I mean, they say it's supposed to be secure and private, but like that's the kind of thing where it would be nice if Apple could have provided that functionality locally, if they could have invested more in their chips to make that happen or whatever, but that's not an option. And I think that that's probably the direction we'll see their hardware business go in, which is that more of their hardware will be offloaded to like data centers with their custom designed chips. And they'll probably charge a monthly subscription for stuff like that. And that'll just be how it is. And that'll be unfortunate.
yeah, that's fair. Yeah. I was just curious for your thoughts.
Apple is. All of the Apple releases this year have just been kind of
bad.
annoying to me. Because I feel like all of the tech reviewers who review Apple products don't. This is okay. This is an entirely separate topic, but a lot of them don't cover Apple very critically anymore, and they review the products, but they take Apple's announcements at face value. So, like for example, Apple announced like the new Apple Watch, the Series 10, has like a 1 hertz screen, so they can update it every second, and they can do that on the always-on display. But that isn't new to Apple Watches. They've had that since the Series 5. They just didn't do it on the always-on display, but that's a software upgrade. And you can tell because on the older watches, like if you're in a workout, for example, the always-on display will update every second. So they could add a second hand to all of these existing watches. They probably didn't for some reason like battery, for example, or I don't know. But like you see a lot of tech reviewers treat this as like entirely new display technology. And it's the first 1 hertz display out there because Apple positioned it like that during their marketing. They talked a lot about that and how they could do that for the first time, even though like that's been around. It's been around a while, yeah. And it's stuff like that where like Apple, I think, overhypes sometimes even features that like have already existed in their old products, and people treat it as a new thing every time, and it just gives a lot of marketing hype to Apple products, basically.
Yeah, I think the most interesting change as of recent, and I know I've been joking about this, because you mentioned on Signal that they upgraded the Mac Mini to be 16 gigs of RAM, and then you said, now I feel less bad recommending this, or I'm less embarrassed to recommend this, but then I quoted that, and I said, oh, well, did you know they moved the power button to the bottom of the Mac Mini now? It's still pretty embarrassing, because now if you have a Mac Mini on your desk, you have to lift it up and hit the power button on the bottom, even though it's not something that you should ever have to like move. It's on your desk. It's not a laptop.
I'm really confused about that decision because I didn't hear about that until you sent it. But I don't understand how they could think that's a good idea.
Yeah. But you know what? They also just re-released the Magic Mouse, and they kept the charge port on the bottom.
Of course.
It's USB-C. Now it's USB-C, so there's that. So they're only 10 years late to that.
Apple's just a ridiculous company, honestly.
All right, well, let's get into the actual Q&A now. I want to thank everybody for being along for the ride so far. So as always, the way we do the Q&As, we start with our patrons. Most recently, we have the Techlorians, which is pretty much Patreon on our forum that's self-hosted by ourselves. and then you go directly through us. I know some people have complained about privacy.com cards not working on Patreon and Patreon being a little nitpicky with that. That shouldn't be an issue if you go through our forum. That was part of the reason why we did that. But also we're just trying to do more and more things under our own umbrella, just, keep things a little bit better. Also, Patreon takes a pretty big cut as well, so we get to keep a little bit more of the cut on our ends. So yeah, we have patrons, we have Techlorians, we also have people on XMR chat who tipped us with Monero. That's a new thing that we're doing. And then we'll open up to the live chat. Again, feel free to keep leaving your questions in the live chat. I am seeing them, but that's kind of the order of priority. If you want your live chat definitely looked at, we will do super chats first in the live chat, and then we'll kind of just go through all the questions and pick out the ones that we want to deal with. So yeah. Sound good?
Sounds good. Who are we starting off with first?
We're starting off with user on Patreon. This was actually posted a day after our last live stream. So they were late to our last live stream, and I told them we'll include it in the next Q&A. So they said, you guys have inspired me to get certificates and start working on breaking into cybersecurity, which is awesome, by the way. To Henry, Nick, and Jonah. I don't know who Nick is, but I assume Nate? Question mark? I don't know. But since you are also so passionate about online privacy and security, have any of you considered a career in cybersecurity or governance compliance? Do you want to start? Do you want me to start?
It was definitely something that I considered for a while, and especially like getting into like privacy compliance with companies, I think would be an interesting career for a lot of people, because I think that there is a big opportunity, especially with new privacy regulation coming out all the time, for people who are like actually passionate about privacy to get into this field and try and affect change at these tech companies to like not only follow the law, but maybe like go above and beyond what's required. And so that was something I was looking into for a while, but I'm kind of getting out of that into more of this education stuff, because I was working in IT prior to this, for example, but I think that working on like stuff like Techlore, stuff like privacy guides has been really big. And then I'm working on a new project right now called TripleBit, which we've talked a little bit about, and it's a nonprofit. We're doing stuff that's coming soon, so maybe I'll talk more about that in the future when things are more finalized. But that's taken up a lot of my time lately. So
yeah, I mean the concept. I don't know. Can I share a little bit?
Yeah.
I mean the concept with TripleBit. It's Jonah's nonprofit, and the concept is to do like hosting Tor nodes, hosting Monero nodes, and pretty much just trying to host different things for people. I know Jonah has a lot more ideas than that, but it's kind of just a way to kind of give back a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Because
cool.
I mean, all these these privacy projects need like this infrastructure to function well. And I think that like being more technically involved with projects like Tor, for example, is going to be like really good for me and like my understanding of Tor and how all this stuff works. So like I can pass along knowledge that I share, for example, and also just like giving back to people who actually use these privacy tools every day. We can provide that stuff for free to hopefully improve the experience and make it more private and secure and decentralized. So
yeah, good stuff. I'm excited for it, and I'm honored you asked me to be a board member. So
yeah,
yeah, there will be a lot more announcements about that once it's ready. Yeah, on my end, this is tough. I mean, I've been doing Techlore for like almost a decade now, and I think any person who posts a lot on YouTube, I wouldn't believe them if they didn't say they have like an annual check-in of whether or not they wanted to keep doing it, because it's stressful. There's a lot of things that are problems unique to this job. So without getting too much into that, I have considered different avenues to go in a lot of different areas. So when I originally went to college, it was for software engineering, and I kind of thought I'd go into the tech side of things. And then over time, I really fell in love with like digital media. And what I really liked about that major specifically was it combined like the artistic side of things of tech with the technical side of tech, which I actually realized I enjoy a lot more than just writing code. with that said, Techlore has always done well, and then recently I took a job with Cake Wallet, and I've been really enjoying it. It's really great because I get to be a part of a company I really enjoy, which is Cake Wallet, and I've been doing marketing for them. But I also still get to kind of like dabble in cybersecurity, privacy, and all this good stuff here with Techlore, and it's really great. So I don't know. Both Jonah and I did do a certifications, so we are technically like cybersecurity certified, at least the intro certification through ISC2, however you say it, or ISC squared.
Yeah.
So that was a whole era for us. I know both of us got a Google recruiter reached out to both of us at different time periods, which both of us were like, oh, that's interesting. So that was an interesting moment for sure. And being on that phone call with the Google recruiter for me was really weird because I was like, well, what would I do? I mean, I like privacy, and you guys don't really. And they're like,
Right.
kind of what you said, make change from the inside. It sounds great in theory, but so there's just been a lot of opportunities that have come up over the years that all sound really nice, but I honestly just keep coming back to this because it's what I love doing, and it's got a good community, and I really enjoy it. So yeah, I don't think it's off the table though. I actually have been thinking about doing, ironically, I just brought up Google, but doing the Google cybersecurity course is something that I've been thinking about doing. I've heard a lot of good things about it. And kind of just building it out. Yeah. That's all I have.
Yeah. It's probably, yeah, I don't think either of us are probably going to be making big changes because we already do all this work full time. So kind of set in this career path. But it's exciting to the person who asked this question.
Yeah.
Getting that certification and getting into the field because it's important to get people in cybersecurity. And it's really important to get people who actually care about privacy into the cybersecurity field because
that's not everybody in the field.
It's not everybody in the field.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I'd say a majority of people in InfoSec that I've talked to just don't really care about privacy very much, which is a bummer because it seems they're very compatible with each other. Like the less data you collect, the more secure you're going to be, and they help each other out in a lot of different ways. So I don't know why there's such a disconnect for a lot of people, but yeah. Also, I mean, cybersecurity is going to have like so much demand for such a long time. So I think it's a really good certificate and like a cool career to break into. So yeah, wishing you luck. Keep us updated. Now we have Techlorians and patrons. So we have our Q&A thread on our forum. It should be linked in the live chat for those of you who want to check it out. We're going to go ahead and find the patrons and Techlorians first, and then we'll go through those.
All right. The first Techlorian I see is Backfield 3779 on the forum. The first question they have is for you, so I'll read it. They say, Henry, in one of your videos where you discussed your browser journey, you implied that it was likely that Brave could replace your need for multiple browsers in the future when they implemented forgetful browsing feature. Now, over a year later with that available in Brave, it seems like you didn't do that and you've still been using Mulvet Browser and Brave separately. So what were the reasons behind that choice? Because using Brave for everything could have been the simpler setup. And I know you like minimalism, right? So
yeah. No, so I actually did play with this. I did set Brave as a default. I used the forgetful browsing feature, which for those of you who don't know, Brave released this feature, which is like a pseudo private mode, which the way it works is you don't have to do anything different. You just use your browser like normal, even in a non-private mode. But when you go on a website and you close the tab, like 10 seconds later, it wipes all the data from that website, essentially, unless you whitelist that site in the shields or whatever. The issue I was stumbling on is I realized that there were a lot of times where I wanted to open a link. Like someone sent me a link on Signal, but I didn't want it to be saved. And there were a lot of exclusions I used in Brave. There's a lot of sites I want to stay logged into with Brave. And so I found that using Mulvet as a default browser, and then I click a link and it by default going into this fully disposable browser was the best bet. Because what would happen, for example, is someone would send me a YouTube link. But I'm always logged into YouTube on that Brave browser. So that wouldn't really use the forgetful browsing feature because I whitelisted that one site. So it just wasn't as clean as I wanted it to be. I found using Mulvet as a default browser, which is a little bit cleaner. But I agree, it is a little bit simpler to just use Brave. And if these aren't concerns for you, then that's a perfectly good workflow that I actually really enjoy as well. It's just I like mine better. But
Cool.
they also asked you a question, which I'm really excited about because I, for some reason, introduced you to Zen before you knew about it. I don't know if I'm the reason why you tried it, but I at least brought it up with you and you said you never heard of it before. So, how's your experience been with Zen Browser? Would you recommend it to people who would be interested, even if it's currently in alpha? How does it feel to be featured on their website? I didn't know you're featured on their website.
I didn't know I was featured on their website until I read this question.
Are you?
They linked to my Mastodon post about it. So.
Oh, fun. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the vibe there with the Zen Browser?
Yeah. So Zen Browser, I can't say that I would recommend it. Well, first of all, Zen Browser is it's very similar in theory to Arc Browser, if anyone has been following that, but it's open source and it's based on Firefox instead of Chromium, which is very exciting to me because I used Arc Browser for a bit and I really liked a lot of the things that Arc Browser did. It's a very good browser for power users because it does so much stuff that I need a browser to do, and it has vertical tabs and it has multiple browser profiles in the same window, which is probably my biggest use case because I like to have like a social media profile for keeping up with like Twitter, but have that completely separate. But I don't want to use the profile switcher in like Brave or something and switch between all these profiles all the time. It's really inconvenient. And so Zen Browser is working on a lot of these same things, but with Firefox, which is super cool. It is still in alpha, and that's the main reason I wouldn't recommend it. It also isn't like very complete in terms of the UI yet. It's way better than like what I've been seeing from Firefox in the Firefox nightly builds. I know Firefox is working on vertical tabs as well and other things, and Zen Browser has really done the UI in a much better way that I like, as kind of for my power user browser preferences. I really like a lot of it, but they still have a lot more work to do before I could potentially switch to it. Some nice things that they could grab from like Arc, for example. A lot of like touchpad gestures don't work, and I work on my Mac laptop a lot, so that's kind of the biggest thing that I would need fixed to be able to use a browser efficiently. So kind of a deal breaker just on that alone. But yeah, it's exciting, and it really is like a lot of people have asked me about it because they saw that Mastodon post that I posted about it, where I said that I like it and I like the idea of it, and I'm supporting them on Patreon because I want to support their development, which I think is important for open source projects. Even though I'm not actively using it as my daily browser right now, I think that the vision and the potential for it is exactly what I want a Firefox-based browser to be. I want to have a Firefox-based browser that isn't like fully funded by ads, and I like that they're going this Patreon route where they're getting a lot of like grassroots community donations to help fund the development of this. And I think it'll be a really compelling option to switch to, hopefully sooner or later, even though I'm not using it actively right now. I guess that's kind of the main thing with it. And I think that I'll just add one more thing, just like to tie it into privacy and security a bit. There's always like that concern with Firefox forks, for example, and there is always a danger of updates being delayed or that kind of thing. And that's something that I'm going to keep an eye on. But in comparison to a browser like Arc, for example, I like that Zen Browser is really just focusing on a single thing, which is like browser UI development. And they're not really doing a lot of other stuff as well, because like the recent Arc security scandal was because Arc was also trying to do like a lot of different cloud-based stuff and AI stuff and like collaboration stuff in their browser. They're trying to see like how they can make this into a product that businesses want to use, for example. So those are the kind of features that are going to present security risks because you're making like these cloud connections and stuff to Arc servers. And even if they try to do it correctly, there's no guarantee that they will. And obviously in this case, they didn't until they fixed it. And Zen Browser isn't really working on like collaborative cloud stuff like that. So I'm less concerned about something like what happened to Arc happening to Zen, for example. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's cool. I've been pretty critical of Firefox lately, as people have probably seen. So having more browsers in the space is always a good thing, I think.
Yeah. I personally, I'm disinterested, just because I'm not someone who likes vertical tabs. I'd probably use just stock Firefox before I used Zen Browser. But I know a lot of people love Arc, yourself included, or at least you did before they started doing weird stuff. I will say from what I've read, just a couple things to add on. You can't do like Netflix in Zen Browser. It doesn't support Widevine, I believe. So that's something to keep in mind. They don't have the license for it yet. And also there is no mobile version, and they're committing to not doing a mobile version. Zen is a desktop-only browser, which syncs over Firefox Sync, which actually is a really cool middle ground, because then you can just use your favorite Firefox browser on mobile, and it'll still sync your bookmarks and everything to Zen on desktop. So
Yeah. Well, I think that's, I mean, a really good decision on their end, because
I agree.
there's only like one way to make a mobile browser. It's not like they're going to be bringing anything new to the table
I agree.
with anything that they would do. So,
Yeah, I fully agree. We have a patron question here from Flacco304. I have a question about a Google account. After I delete my Google account, does Google still keep the data, such as browsing information, sites visited, emails, etc.? Does it really delete users' account activity? I don't delete my activity on my activity page, or I didn't delete my activity on my activity page on Google, and I didn't turn off any activity controls before deleting the account. So do they keep my data in secret, or does it really get deleted? Thanks.
I mean, the only realistic answer is that there's no way to know for sure. And to be honest with you, with a lot of these like really complex tech services like Google, for example, who run like hundreds of different products, I wouldn't even be convinced that Google knows the answer to that question in some cases, because they probably have a lot of different disparate backup systems for all their data and stuff to keep all your data like secure when you're using it. They don't want to lose anything, so they probably have a whole complex mess of systems, and it happens more often than you think that like this data is found in like an old backup or something that developers just forgot existed, because that can happen in giant companies like this. So
Yeah, wasn't there a Google Drive bug for Workspace not too long ago where deleted files were reappearing? Or am I making that up?
I think I heard something about that.
So,
And it sounds like the kind of thing that can happen. I've heard, I mean, stuff like that has happened with other platforms pretty often, so I wouldn't be surprised.
yeah. I don't know. My take on this is we don't know. It's out of your control. So do what you can and move on.
Yeah,
And because what if they do or don't, what are you going to do about it? You already deleted the
yeah,
account. It's done. So just move on. Just make sure you be a little bit more aware of this next time. And it's not to dismiss the concerns, but again, hypothetical versus realistic risks is a good way to start assessing like whether or not something is worth your time or energy to like stress over. And in this case, you're probably better off stressing over your next accounts that you're going to open and what you think they're going to be, instead of wondering whether or not Google deleted it. And I think the fact that we don't know the answer to that question speaks volumes to the service as a whole, and why it's good for people to just think about that before putting everything into Google.
absolutely.
Yeah, big selling point
Yeah, I
too
mean,
for like end-to-end encrypted or zero knowledge
yeah,
services. Yeah,
exactly what I was about to say. I
yeah,
mean, that's huge.
yeah. Like Luna's Hask.
All
I
right.
really enjoy it. I might make a video on it, even though it's not really like privacy or
It's
security.
encrypted.
It's
I mean, you
encrypted,
know,
but I like it a
which
lot.
is more than you can say about the alternatives.
That's true.
Looks like our next question is from Quantum on the forum. Two questions. First one, do you think there could be a positive role for government funding of open source projects, similar to how the US government often sponsors research at universities through the National Science Foundation?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not that familiar with like the way Europe does it, but there's so many projects that people use that actually have funding from the government. Um, so it's pretty common in Europe for the government to actually fund some open source projects.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a huge like commitment from the EU right now into like making sovereign tech that's run in Europe as opposed to the US, and they're funding a lot of stuff. Like
Matrix.
NLNet, I think is one of the biggest programs. Yeah, Matrix, Mastodon, all sorts of
Um,
stuff. And
yeah,
even in the
same
US, I
thing.
mean, there's a lot of programs for people developing open source privacy related stuff. Signal gets funding from the Open Tech Fund, which is a US government program, for example. So there's all sorts of stuff. And I think generally it's a good thing.
Yeah, no, I think it's great.
There's certainly worse things the government could be spending money on. So
I agree. Yeah, and it's nice because again, it benefits everybody. I think
yeah.
um, something that's open source can be directly used. I know this is something we've talked about in the past, but it's a crazy concept that things like voting machines aren't running on open source code. Um, or just a lot of government services aren't running on open source code. Why is that whole industry privatized when it's um, by taxpayers for taxpayers?
Hmm.
It's the kind of thing where it's the perfect situation for open source. I would argue there's no better place for open source software to exist than for an entity that's supposed to prioritize transparency above all, which is what a government should prioritize, in my opinion. So yeah, it's just wild to me that I guess there wouldn't be more support for stuff like this, but luckily there is a lot of it happening around the world. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think the answer to that's yes. There could be a massive positive role here for government funding open source projects, and it happens. I mean, the
And
second
your
one's
second
probably
question,
here.
I was gonna say it must be for you.
It's not for me because I've never seen it. So
Oh,
have you
well
watched?
then it is for
Oh,
you.
have you finally? They
So
said
the answer
finally.
is no.
So yeah, yeah, they're asking me because yeah, I still haven't. Um, yeah, let's see. In the last year, what have I watched? I watched Severance. That was
It's a good
good.
show.
You recommended that. Um, Still no season two.
Coming soon though.
Yeah, they've been saying that.
January.
Oh yeah,
January.
they gave a formal release date. That's coming up.
Announced, yeah.
You know, when they announced the release date, I go, that's just never going to happen. But now it's getting closer. It's
It's getting
almost November.
closer. Can't wait.
Yeah, that's exciting. Um, but yeah, no, the answer to that's no. I should though. People really like Mr. Robot. Let us know in the live chat if you've seen Mr. Robot, and if so, if you liked it, because I'd love to see if I should watch it. If I get 5 yeses, perhaps I will watch
Oh, you heard him.
it.
Get in the chat.
All right, we have another question from a Techlorian. Again, essentially like our patrons, but on our forum. They sent a data deletion request based on GDPR to a company, and they replied, but they want ID verification. What they can legally request to prove that I'm the actual owner of the account and or I'm a citizen of the EU. Now they want to do this via a third-party verification software, and after they read the privacy policy, there were some red flags. And they think that it's more dangerous to carry out the check via third party than to leave the data there. In addition, I have the right to censor everything out in the ID that's not necessary. What would be in an auto process not really possible? Now here comes my question. What should I do if they decide to not delete my data without the ID verification with the third party? Yeah, I've seen this a lot, and it's actually really common, and a lot of people ask this question of, I'm being ID'd to delete a service or to opt out of XYZ, and they normally try to verify that you are a citizen of Europe or you're a citizen of California or wherever there's privacy regulation. And then people go, well, I shouldn't have to upload my ID. That's really ironic that I have to upload more data to get you to stop collecting my data and using it for nefarious purposes. So I think you kind of got to this in your question, on my end at least, which is you need to kind of ask yourself, do you think it's worth it? Like, what's the data that you're trying to delete? And is that data, in your eyes, a bigger risk than uploading your ID to these platforms? There is no secret magic answer that I can give you here, at least on my end, outside of it's just tough and it's super frustrating that there's no better way to do this. And I don't think it's legally required to actually get an ID, as far as I know. They have to get some kind of verification, but a lot of services I've deleted information from just asked for like an address and a name, and they kind of just took that at face value. So yeah, those are kind of all my thoughts. I wish I had a better answer for you.
Yeah, I do think you probably will have better luck in the EU. It GDPR is like it's pretty complicated, but there are like alternatives you can go to. It really depends on the country that you're in though, but like there are data protection authorities that you can also get involved with this if the company isn't responsive to this. So that might be a route worth exploring, but you would have to do more research into GDPR in your region and how all that works to figure out what to do.
Right. Yeah, I guess there is no secret here. It just sucks when providers do this kind of nonsense because I just don't get it. Facebook is one that I know people complain about a lot. I've seen a lot of complaints about Facebook where people try to delete their Facebook account. Facebook asks for you to upload your ID or any of that kind of nonsense. And I just think that's terrible.
Yeah.
There's just no need for it. All right.
Looks like their second question is how to switch from WhatsApp to Signal. Their family and I all have Signal installed and are registered. My father's tech savvy and he also knows about tracking and privacy, but he doesn't think it matters what they say or use at the end. So how should they try to approach their family to switch to Signal, basically, for the communication between them?
Yeah, I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, but we've talked about this quite a bit in the past. And normally, it's hard for us to give one answer that applies and connects to everybody. Some people have better luck just going a forceful route where they go, I'm only going to use Signal, so let's set this up. And they pretty much draw a line in the sand and go, we either use Signal or we don't talk. And then some people have a much more like human, personal approach of like, hey, it would mean a lot if we use Signal. Here are my reasons. We don't have to migrate from WhatsApp if we want. If we could just have two groups and we can keep sensitive stuff in Signal and then non-sensitive stuff in WhatsApp. And then maybe you could advertise like disappearing messages on Signal as a place to do that. Like, oh, we can share passwords and stuff in Signal. And then you get them on Signal and then you can start using it a little bit more with them over time. So those are just generally like the places to start. I think communicating and just being open about it is super important. And there is no magic bullet answer, kind of like the last one here. Just try different things. And like I'd say just make it clear it's something that really matters to you. I think, if it's a family member and they want to hear you and hear why it's important to you, I think that they're more likely to do it. I've had a lot of luck with that. And I keep probably 90+% of my communication in Signal. So I'm sure having this whole channel though helps my selling points.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you have a different approach that you would take?
No, I think I pretty much agree with you. I mean, this question is always like so personal as far as like what your relationship is with these other people. You have to approach it on a personalized level. So there isn't a one size fits all answer to how to convince other people to do something, right? It's a social issue more than anything. So
yeah. And this
yeah.
applies to like any social issue, I guess, if that makes sense. Like you can't convince everybody to care about privacy by just yelling at them. Like it's going to connect differently for each person, and I don't think Signal's any different. The nice thing is getting someone to use Signal, they don't have to have a reason to do it. If you just communicate well and connect with them and just ask them politely, they might not need a reason outside of just, okay, I'm doing this because this person wants me to be here. Yeah. But I hope that was useful. And keep us updated too. I know we have our weekly wins. That's a whole thing we do on our forum because there's a lot of, I feel like, negativity in the privacy space a lot of times, and there's a lot of like, I don't know, it's just kind of a down space. A lot of news is negative. We don't see that much positive privacy news, and I feel like a lot of things just kind of bring people down. I'm trying to find it. Maybe I missed it. I want to showcase this. Yeah, here it is. So we do like our weekly privacy and security wins each week on our forum. So if you want to like be a part of a little cute thing we do each week, it's kind of cool to see everybody's journeys along the way. So
yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm like so low energy right now. For people who are tuning in right now, I said this at the very beginning, but I made a bad decision of like getting up to date on my vaccines yesterday, and I'm paying the price. So I'm like slowly tuning out mentally right now, but I'm trying my best. Um, where is it? Q&A live stream. Here we are. All right. We went through all the patrons. We went through all the Techlorians. And now we have just a few people on XMR chat. This is a way that you can just tip us Monero and send us a message along the way. It's kind of like Super Chats, but with Monero. It's pretty cool. And it's a way for you to like be a part of the Q&A without needing to like give over payment information to even us if you don't want to. So yeah, we got a couple just thanks and thank you for the tips. Someone from Anon and we got a JJ. So it's just always nice to see those tips come in. Someone said they're looking for a Google Sheets alternative to share and edit a spreadsheet with a few others online. Any recommendations? It's a tough one.
Yeah, that is a good question. I don't use a lot of spreadsheets personally, so like I know a lot of people use CryptPad, for example,
Yeah.
which is kind of the main hosted one that I can think of off the top of my head. Otherwise, you're usually looking into self-hosted options.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to recommend. I used CryptPad for spreadsheets for a
Okay.
solid year, and it only made me want to die a few times during that year because it is pretty buggy. Luckily, my spreadsheet usage isn't as complicated as some people's, but just keep in mind it's not going to be Google Sheets. It's going to be a less robust, less reliable version of Google Sheets. But it's still probably good enough for a lot of people. But yeah, like Jonah said, there's going to be Nextcloud and there's going to be other options there if you can't do that. OnlyOffice is something that I would recommend checking out as well. I've used OnlyOffice. And that's actually what we used for surveillance support for a while. And I think it has collaborative spreadsheets. But I don't know why, but in my head, the spreadsheets that OnlyOffice uses is the same underlying software as CryptPad, or it's a similar one. Because pretty much it's like an open source spreadsheet program that they bake in to the suite that you can utilize, I think. Mm-hmm. But I might be wrong on that, so don't quote me on that. They asked for thoughts on Zoho. I've never tried Zoho's suite, so I don't know if you have.
I haven't really tried Zoho. I know it's like enticing because it's very cheap alternative to Google Workspace, and it isn't Google, so that's a plus, but it doesn't really have any like privacy or security benefits on top. Like you're not getting encryption or you're just shifting trust from Google to Zoho, which may be good enough for you, but it's not really something I would recommend as a privacy service by any means.
Nice. Yeah, and then we have our last Monero tip here from Kev, who says, what are your favorite choices for a Linux distro? Would you ever switch to a Linux desktop as a full-time daily driver? I can let you start if you want.
I probably, as a full-time daily, well, I do use cubes quite often on my ThinkPad, so I don't have like a desktop system, but it's one of my daily drivers that I use that laptop a lot, and that works fine for me. I do still use my MacBook for a lot of other things, and really the only way I'll switch to Linux full-time is when there's good ARM-based hardware, kind of like what we were saying at the beginning of the stream. Either Asahi Linux is gonna get good on Apple Silicon, and then I'll switch to that, or some Snapdragon Elite X laptops will come out that have really good Linux support, and I'll switch to that. So I think Linux is probably in my future one way or another, but it's kind of like whoever gets there first on the hardware front is where I'm going to be at, because I do all of my work on a laptop. I don't have like a desktop setup at all.
Right. Yeah, good stuff. But Cubes isn't a Linux distro.
No, but it does run Linux VMs, so there's a lot of Linux going on.
I'm teasing. I think I'm not someone who's going to go there. Yeah, I mean, favorite choices for Linux distro. I think we've both made it pretty vocal. We both really enjoy Fedora a lot. But I don't, I started on Ubuntu. I think a lot of people start there. It's just probably the most popular one for a lot of people. I used Debian for a while. I definitely did not finish my journey with Debian, enjoying Debian. And then I tried Fedora from there, and I really thought it was the best kind of middle ground. I did use Arch for a while, and that was for this like complicated GPU pass-through setup, trying to run like Windows VMs, the GPU pass-through. And it was okay. It was really buggy though. The whole thing of like an update breaking your system is completely real, and anyone who uses Arch who says it's not real is lying, because it definitely happens. And I refuse to believe I'm special in the world and that it just happened to me. So those are my thoughts there. But yeah, I think Fedora is probably my favorite Linux distro. And I do have some Fedora VMs that I'm using, but I don't have a device to like daily drive Fedora at the moment. So yeah, it's kind of a complicated place right now. And I think I'm in a similar boat as you, trying to find like an ARM-based device that can run something like Fedora. Now, I got sent a laptop from a company called NovaCustom. One word, NovaCustom. And it's running cubes. And so I will be doing some testing and like playing around with cubes. And they even added some fun things. Let me see if it... Oh, that's right. There's power buttons on these things. But they really customized it in a really fun way. Let me see if it...
Did you notice how the power button wasn't on the bottom of the laptop? That's a pretty cool feature.
Hey, look at that. Isn't that cool? And then there's also a custom Techlore key there. I don't know if you can see that. But it's running cubes. I'm still doing playing with it. And then it'll definitely be like a cubes review / a NovaCustom review. And I'm really excited. They were super friendly. I am only bummed that they sent me the 16-inch model because it's the only one that was cube certified. And the 14-inch model is not cube certified and has some weird like pixel density issues, which is really frustrating. So yeah, that's kind of like a coming soon type of deal.
That is an annoying thing with cubes. My ThinkPad has a 4K display, but I run cubes at 1080p manually because that's the only way to get things looking normal.
It's a bummer. Yeah, I actually I couldn't get through it because they pre-encrypt the disk. You can pretty much customize your whole workflow through them. So you can have it pre-installed with any OS of your choice. They'll set it up for you. Their goal is that you just boot up the device. But they also encrypted the hard drive, and I didn't have the password. The password was admin. I had to ask them. But I'm still kind of like trying to log in and kind of like work my way around it. So I'm excited for it. With that said, let's go through the final questions on our forum. So for those of you tuning in right now, where we're at right now is we've done all the patrons, we've done all the Techlorians, we've done all the people in XMR chat. So those are all the people that had like top priority. Thank you all for supporting what we do. It's like a small way that we can give back by at least like guaranteeing that we'll get back to your questions and stuff and hopefully giving you some attention. You can join them as well. There's a lot of cool perks, like you get access to our Signal group. So if you want to chat with us on Signal, we're pretty active there. And I'm sure our Signal group is getting messages right now, but I can't check because then Jonah's face would disappear from this call. So now we're going to go through the regular forum questions. We're going to try to go through these pretty quickly here. And then we will go to the live chat. Again, we're going to get through all these live chat questions that you left here. We're going to pick out the ones that we like want to get back to. And if you have any super chats, we'll start with those as well. So if you're in the live chat, feel free to leave any super chats and we'll get to you right away. Did I cover everything?
All right. Yeah.
Cool.
So what's our first forum question? Let me find it.
Unknown Ghost. They recently discovered that worst name in the world outside of Mulvad's data feature, DAITA, which you could never tell is a feature because it's just data. Anyway, EOS, the ROM, /E/OS. If you try to put that in a search engine, it's...
I was gonna say it's horrible to search anything for that.
And it's interesting because they like self-acknowledge that it's a tough name, and I think they said they were gonna plan to rebrand I'm reading this, like, this is based on my memory from looking at their website, but they still are going by EOS. So anyway, EOS is a custom ROM. It comes with microG out of the box, and I think it's a Lineage fork. I reviewed them on the channel. I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but you know, it's there for somebody. They have an official GSI version, which is the kind of OS that runs on their phone, but the docs advise me not to use it as a daily driver, and they're curious why. So I don't know if you can comment on that.
Yeah, so GSI is it stands for generic system image, and it's kind of this Android concept where Android was trying to like modularize and have like a source or like a base Android OS that could be installed on any device, similar to how you can just install Windows on any device, for example. So it should, with phones that are compatible, you can install it on pretty much all devices, even ones that are incompatible. But the problem with it, and the reason they don't recommend it for unsupported devices, is that when you install this base GSI Android image, it pretty much doesn't have any hardware-specific drivers, and on a phone there are a lot of them that could even include like the modem, for example. So you might not get like voice over LTE, which is mandatory in the US anyways. You might not get like good wireless support. You might not get a lot of the different hardware features on your device. It's basically similar to Linux. Doesn't really have this problem because Linux has drivers for pretty much everything pre-installed. But if you've ever installed Windows
Yeah,
for the first time,
but no
like
drivers.
before the drivers are installed and
Yeah.
everything, the screen is all gigantic and things kind of don't work well. It's probably going to be an experience like that on your phone, where you're going to run into a lot of different weird incompatibility issues. So I don't think that I think they recommend against it for a good reason. And really the point of these images is for like developers and testers to like maybe try and port EOS to other devices easier, but not necessarily to run as a daily driver. So you can install it and see if it works for you, but I think that the warnings that they have are very real in terms of usability. So I think you're going to find your phone will be pretty limited if you do that.
Yeah, they seem to be self-aware as well, because they say they'll install it because either way it's better than a random build from 3 years ago, but they were just curious. So yeah, and they just edited their comment in real time. I feel like you do this in most live streams. I recall there being someone who edits their comments in real time while we're dealing with it, which is really, really fun. Just made it. Just made what? Oh, got it. No other operating systems support my phone. Yeah, what phone do you have?
Yeah, that's the real question, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like in a lot of cases, might be better off selling devices and trying to buy one that is more compatible with other ROMs, if that's
Poco
kind of your
M5.
goal.
I've never heard of the Poco M5.
It's a popular budget phone.
Okay, nice.
Mid-range. Well, the first Poco came out a while ago. I don't know about the Poco M5.
Nice.
I think we'll
Yeah.
probably move on to the next question from Anonymous.
Spooky
Hey, Henry and
season.
Jonah, since we're in the spooky season, I'd like to hear about your all-time favorite horror, whether it's movies, books, or games that have left a lasting impression on you. Do you have any recommendations?
Okay, yeah. So on my end, first off, I'll go through what they suggest, because they clearly are very passionate about this and they have their picks in here. I don't love horror stuff, and it sucks because it's not even during. Like, I don't mind horror movies. I have a lot of respect for them. They're really well done, and the whole concept of invoking fear through a 2D screen is crazy to me. It's so cool, and I think like horror movies can be some of the most artistic movies. But I just have nightmares, man. Like I'm scared shitless when I go to bed every night for like the next week after I watch a horror movie, and I hate that. So yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on horror movies. I really want to like them and watch more, but I feel like my quota for horror movies is like one a year. Now, to answer your question directly, and I feel like for people who are really into horror stuff, this might be an embarrassing answer. I don't know. I'm not that in the community. I love The Babadook. I think that was such a fun movie. For those who haven't seen it, it's like, it's just so good because the concept is that a woman has a kid. People have seen a clip from this because there's a common meme format that's like, why can't she just be normal? And then there's a kid like
Oh,
screeching. That's from the Babadook.
okay.
Why can't you just be normal?
I have seen that.
Yeah, that's from Babadook. But pretty much the concept is this kid is a nightmare. He's a pain in the ass, and he talks about this Babadook thing and how it's gonna get him and his mom. It's a single mom with the kid, and the whole movie is the mom like struggling to take care of this kid because he's a nightmare. And pretty much there's a whole backstory of like the husband dying in a car crash, but they don't really touch much on it. And the whole concept, not, and again, kind of spoilers, but I won't spoil too much, but it's a movie about grief, and like the Babadook is representative of like grief for the husband. And there's a lot of like little details because the Babadook's actually a story in the book. Like the kid reads about the Babadook in this book, but they casually mention things like the mom being a childhood author. And also there's some scenes where the mom has charcoal on her hands, which is, it's like a charcoal-based book. So there's a lot of theories that the Babadook is actually written by the mom as a way to like grieve with her husband. And the end of the movie kind of like reinforces that. So it's just, I like how it's psychological. I like how it makes you like think about grief and I don't know, so, but a lot of horror movies have that, I feel. So
Maybe you should have included spoilers for Babadook. I don't know when this movie came out. Maybe it's old.
it's really old. I mean, it's probably like a decade old.
All
And
right.
I
Well, I
didn't
guess
spoil
everyone
that
should have watched
much.
it.
I think I don't think I spoiled that much, but it's a good movie. I
I'll
don't
have
know.
to
Are
watch
you
it.
into horror movies?
I haven't seen it. So for a long time, I wasn't really into horror movies. I just didn't really like them. But more recently, I've been watching like newer ones that are coming out, and I'm liking them. So unfortunately, like all of these older ones, like the ones brought up in this post, I haven't really seen because I haven't really made it far back in the horror movie catalog out there um, yet. But I think the only one on this list I've seen is Midsummer, which I really, really enjoyed. I love that movie. And I've seen probably most of the horror movies that have come out like within the last few years, and some of them have been good. I just saw Longlegs with Nicolas Cage, and that was good. I think Nicolas Cage has been putting out some hits lately. He's really he's made some sort of shift with his career, but I like the direction that all of his latest movies have gone in. So I really like that. Um, I've seen some movies that have left a lasting impression on me in a bad way. I think I've seen like Night Swim comes to mind as possibly one of the worst movies I've ever seen. So it's almost like enjoyably bad, but it's also just bad. So
Yeah.
there's that. Um, but yeah, I'm really excited to see Smile 2 hopefully sometime this week because I liked the first Smile. And I heard people say that like the first Smile is very reminiscent and derivative of other horror movies, but since I haven't seen older horror movies, I thought it was a great movie. So yeah, just recent stuff, but I'm trying to watch some older classics that people recommend. So if you have any recommendations, I'll probably watch them. Like the oldest one I just watched was The Ring recently. I watched on a plane for the first time, and that was a good movie.
Nice.
So yeah.
Nice. I always laugh when people bring up Nicolas Cage because the only thing I can think of, there's this American Dad clip. Pretty much the concept is the dad is stubborn in this episode. Well, he's always stubborn, but he's really stubborn in this episode. And he thinks he's not useful anymore. And so like he keeps screwing up. He's trying to help the family in different situations, but every time like he just makes things worse. And so he feels like he's useless in the family. And then one of the characters is like trying to hype him up. And he's like, just think of Nicolas Cage. He's put out awful movies, terrible movies. And he lists off like 10 Nicolas Cage movies that were really bad. But then he did it. He put out National Treasure 2, the best movie of all time. And yeah, so that just came
That's
to,
funny.
yeah. But yeah, I
Yeah.
haven't seen any of these new Nicolas Cage movies you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you gotta watch him, and if anyone hasn't seen him, you gotta watch Long Legs. The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent came out a few years ago. That was really good. Dream Scenario was another one he just did last year, and that was really good. So I'm just liking his movies.
Nice.
Um, Another genre I really like in this horror movie genre is like these movies where like people are like trapped somewhere, like 10 Cloverfield Lane, where they're trapped in like a bunker. Or I just watched Room the other week, where this woman and her child were like kidnapped and living in a room for like 7 years. That's the kind of like psychological horror thriller stuff that I like. Probably why I like Severance too. The idea of
Yes.
them all trapped in the basement.
Yeah, Severance is fun. Someone asked
Yeah,
about recent Bitwarden controversy. We started the episode with that, so just rewind and we talk about that whole story.
yeah.
Someone responded to the GSI thing. Um, I think this person is asking, ever since I've switched to Google Pixels, do you think that custom ROMs are its saving grace for most power users since the new Tensor chips are going to be more powerful than their Snapdragon equivalents? I don't know if I'm following the question.
I'm not sure what the question is exactly. I haven't heard much about like new Tensor chips and how they're going to compare. Google historically has lagged behind with their chips. Like they're not making real flagship highest end chips. They never have been. So I don't know if that'll be the case or not.
Aren't they
But
still rebranded Exynos chips with Google
yeah, I
branding?
mean, yeah, I think Google changes some of the design, but they're based on Exynos for sure. And Exynos has always been, well, not always, but for a very long time, it's been behind Snapdragon. So
Wow. Man, I remember the days, I think it was the Galaxy Note 4 or something like that, where the
mhm.
whole thing was to try to get an international model with Exynos because
Yeah,
it was quite a bit more powerful than the Qualcomm variant.
that was also the case when I got my Galaxy S7, whenever that came out a long time ago. But I think that was like the last one where that was the case. And since then, I haven't heard that at all.
Wow, yeah. Throwback to the glory days.
Right?
We already got back to backfield. This is a good question for you. How does TPM plus secure boot plus full disk encryption plus Flatpak Linux compare to something like default Windows or default macOS or default Chrome OS from a security perspective? So that's a big one.
Yeah, and security is really like an all-encompassing term for a lot of things. So it's hard to like pinpoint exactly. It's not a not secure to secure spectrum where it's like everything is in a line. It's a lot of different factors. I think for the vast majority of people, I think it's very safe to say that that setup would be more secure than any of the default setups on Linux, because I think in general Linux is an excellent option for most people to use, and you're going to run into a lot more security issues if you're running these mainstream operating systems that are targeted more and and are just prodded more for vulnerabilities, that kind of thing. Yeah, so I think switching to Linux is pretty much always a good choice for most people. And if it's not a good choice for your specific use case, then uh, you probably know that and will have to make that decision on your own. So I can't really say.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm actually a little bit, because I agree with what you say. I think, like, especially that specific Linux workflow is pretty solid. I think, but I also think that if somebody asks me for like just a high security device for banking, but they're not a tech person, I think I'm more
Mhm.
likely to like say, well, like Mac OS or Chrome OS isn't a bad option either. Um,
Yeah, and there's
so
certainly a lot of advantages to those. I don't think that any of these, well, Windows isn't great, but I don't think that the other two are going to be not secure.
mhm.
Chrome OS obviously has a ton of privacy concerns. I would never buy a Chromebook myself. Um, but like macOS has a lot of things going for it. Like Apple is pretty good about like requesting permissions to use for apps to use like certain hardware features like the camera and that kind of thing. that's just missing on Linux, for example. So there are certainly things that macOS has that I wish Linux would adopt. But
Right.
I don't think you can really go wrong with any of these options. I don't think, like, if you're logging into your bank, for example, if you have a Linux setup, you're not going to get hacked
Yeah.
just doing that, just
Yeah.
like you're not going to on macOS.
Yeah, the way people bring up, I think, especially Linux security issues is just really disingenuous, the way they bring it up, because it's like,
Yeah,
oh, there's this one thing Linux doesn't do. Therefore, it's grossly insecure, super bad. If you use it, you're stupid, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, there's millions of Linux users and they're not getting hacked because they're on Linux. So either you're exaggerating these concerns or you're just not keeping enough context on them and like having a bigger picture in mind. And I feel like that's kind of where it is. And I actually think in some ways, the question is not even a valid question because you include all of these really solid security protections with your Linux configuration, but why not apply those to Mac OS or Windows? If you say TPM plus secure boot plus full disk encryption plus Flatpak Linux, well, what if you did, Mac OS with like Objective-C security tools, like enabling file vault, and then like using VMs in Mac OS is like an alternative to using Flatpak. So I think like you can add a lot of these security protections that you reference to these other operating systems as well. And you can really have a really comprehensive kind of security setup. So I think as long as you understand the limitations of each operating system that you're on, you can pretty much like patch up or at least be aware of those concerns well enough to know like what to do and what not to do on that operating system. But I think it's great. I think a lot of people attack Flatpak. Again, similar thing to the whole like you're gonna get instantly hacked if you use Flatpak because their sandboxing doesn't do this one thing that I want it to do, and it's like, well, when has this happened? like in the
right.
real world, how many times has like the Flatpak sandbox been escaped because of this one security issue? And it doesn't mean we shouldn't make it better and try to improve it, but I think people really lose context in these things. So
Absolutely.
yeah, that's something we talk about a lot. But I'm a big fan of Flatpak. I think it's a really, especially with something like Silverblue. Like if you use Fedora Silverblue with Flatpaks, I think it's a really good place to be.
Yeah, I like it. And I think that like
And you,
containerizing all these apps like this is probably the best way to kind of take some of these Mac OS features that I was talking about
exactly.
too, because you can
Flat
do it
sync.
on a per app basis. They're working on, yeah, like per app permissions for Flatpaks. They're working on like Flatpak portal where you can like limit the files that the app can access, that kind of thing. So it's a good step in the right direction for sure.
Yeah. Have you heard of this? I haven't heard of this, so I don't really want to talk about it because I don't know about it. But
Um,
there's been a decision to remove Russian maintainers from the Linux kernel.
oh yeah, I did hear about that. As far as I know, there was no like technical reason for them to do so. So like for the second part of your question, do you think it'll lead to a situation where the code contributed by them might need to be removed or scrutinized? I don't think that's going to be the case. It's not like the University of Minnesota, for example, where they contributed bad code and they were all removed from the kernel development project. As far as I know, these Russian maintainers were just removed from the list because there are a lot of restrictions to working with people in Russia because of sanctions right now, and it's just a legal issue for the Linux Foundation to work with them, and so they had to get information from these maintainers, and that I don't think the maintainers provided, so they had to be removed. And I think it's just comes down to like a legal thing and not a technical thing. So I don't think it's any indicator whatsoever that their past contributions are problematic. So no, I don't think it's an issue.
Raymond's a regular, and I didn't know about this, but apparently Google's being fined $2.5 decillion by Russia because they refused to restore the accounts of pro-Kremlin and state-run media outlets. That's crazy.
Well, good luck, Russia.
Yeah.
As far as I know, I think a year or two ago, Google Russia, the company, declared bankruptcy, and so they're not even in Russia. So I don't know what Russia's going to do about it.
Yeah, that's probably why they did that.
But good for them.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay, we already got back to these.
Internet goes, any thoughts on Bluesky versus Mastodon? Um, I think Mastodon is far better. That's my thought.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm getting really, 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 really tired of these Twitter alternatives. And here are the discussions that I hear. I hear, oh man, yeah, Twitter's gone to crap. I hate it, blah, blah, blah. And then I hear, and then there's threads, but I don't like the moderation on threads because there's been apparently some moderation issues on threads recently, where accounts are getting banned for no reason and all this nonsense. And everyone's like describing a platform that already exists. I just get so frustrated by it. They're like, yeah, we just want a platform that, we can, we can kind of create our own rules. We can kind of, set up our own, like, but it's not controlled by a billionaire or a big tech company, blah, 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 blah. The only one that does that's Mastodon. And I just get really frustrated seeing all these discussions of like where people just blatantly ignore the obvious solution in the room. And I say this as somebody who doesn't love Mastodon. I think Mastodon is really rough around the edges. I have a lot of weird issues with it. I think it's obnoxious with how it like shows likes and stuff on the timeline. I think it's weird how like if I get a link to a Mastodon server on Signal and it's not the one that I use, it just opens in my web browser and it doesn't open in my Mastodon client. I think that's super messy and obnoxious. So I have a lot of complaints with Mastodon, but it resolves the core issues that people have with all these other platforms, which is moderation and not being owned by some like giga billionaire macho bro. Like
Right.
Zuckerberg recently has been really obnoxious. I don't know if you've been keeping up with his new emo phase recently, but
No, I haven't.
yeah,
Sounds annoying though.
yeah. But yeah, I know you have thoughts on this as someone who hosts a Mastodon server.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Mastodon is just clearly it's technically superior to Bluesky when it comes to like kind of democratizing and decentralizing the social media space. I think Bluesky is still very highly reliant on like centralized platforms, and it's still reliant on like billionaire funding, for example. So you have all the issues associated with that. But really, the model I think doesn't really make sense in terms of building a federated platform. They're really building um, basically a straight up Twitter alternative. And it's very easy to see why people, like a certain demographic of people who use Twitter, enjoy Bluesky a lot, because I think the vibe is very similar because they're very similar products. But I don't think there will ever be like a real decentralized ecosystem around Bluesky, whereas the federated model that Mastodon uses and that Matrix uses makes a lot more sense to me. It's very similar to how email works right now, and email is very decentralized. There are so many email providers you can choose from, and extending that model to social media just makes the most sense. So
Yeah.
I will not be using Bluesky, and I'll keep using Mastodon because I think it's better.
Yeah, and I think I've done this rant now like 10 times. Like every month, the last 10 months, I feel I've had this rant. If you don't like the direction Twitter/X is going because it's controlled by one person from a not so great company, whatever your reasons are, I have news for you, which is that Threads is not going to end up different. Threads
Yeah, I
might
don't
be
know why
good
that's so
now, like
shocking.
every Facebook product is when it's launched, but before you know it, it's going to be an ad platform that's entire purpose is to serve you ads. It's going to be AI nonsense, AI crap, and it's going to turn out like every other Facebook platform. Are you telling me that Facebook kind of got their stuff together just for this one launch? And I don't know, I'm just hypercritical of Facebook products. I think it's crazy that people think that like Threads is the answer to the direction Twitter's gone, where it's
Yeah.
probably going to end up being the same exact thing in 5 years. Anyway, Unknown Ghost left a final little joke comment here. We were joking in the chat about the people stealing regular badges. Um, yeah, I know that was kind of a topic from the last day or so.
Oh, were you talking about that? I'm
Yeah,
gonna miss that.
it's not important. I was just making jokes about I think other people were making jokes about like regular badges being stolen because people were losing their regular status because they weren't as active. But
Yep.
I don't know. I'm just really like I think it's fine. Um,
Yeah, there's activity requirements. It looks at your activity over the past 100 days on the form. And so I can call you out on Ghost because I pulled up your profile and you haven't been on more than 50% of the last 100 days, so you're not a regular. That's how it works. You got to read more posts. Maybe you'll get it tomorrow because you're at 49 out of 100.
Whoa, they're pretty close. But yeah, I don't. There was an interesting here climbing out of the rabbit hole. This person, I believe, said that they like lost. Was it this person? One of these posts was about somebody who like lost their regular status, and they're like, "Oh, I kind of feel done." And I thought it was actually really good. Like we have the regular thing there because some people want to be on the forum a lot and they want to like see the reward for that and like have like cool exclusive things. But as somebody who like wants to have a good relationship with the tech I use, like when we see engagement, it's a lot of people just log in, quickly see like what they missed, and then they leave the forum. And I think that's actually perfect. That's how social media and all these platforms should be. There shouldn't be infinite scroll loops. There shouldn't be like algorithmically generated content that's designed to keep you engaged as long as possible. So I don't know. I think if you're a regular because you just want to be on the forum a lot, I think that's great. And that's why we have that there for you. But I wouldn't have shame over it. And I think it's good that you're probably doing other things. So
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. I say that as someone who has the forum. And I think the forum still provides a lot of value, but I don't think that you need to live on the forum. Yeah.
Very fair.
Throwing myself under the bus on that one. I don't know. I just wish people had like better relationship with their tech. And now the live chat. So the way we do this is we both kind of go through and we see if there's a cool question and we call it out. So Jonah, if you see anything,
all right, let me see if the live chat's
We're gonna do it to
on my phone here.
And by the way, we'd love any super chats or anything like that. If any of you definitely want your question answered like right now, we'll go ahead and skip through and do any super chats or anything like that. So yeah. What is your advice?
What are your
oh, you go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
You go ahead.
I was just going to say, what are your thoughts on living exclusively on Bitcoin or cryptocurrency for day-to-day spending and bills and stuff? And how would you implement a lifestyle?
That's
what
hard.
are the drawbacks?
That's really hard.
Yeah.
That's hard. I mean, it's like for context, it's already hard to like live off of cash in a lot of areas now, right? So I think cryptocurrency is going to be an even taller order, but probably you're gonna have to use some kind of like gift card service is my guess. Like Cake Wallet has Cake Pay. I know there's coin cards out there as well. And there's a few other like cryptocurrency gift card platforms. I haven't used the other ones outside Cake Pay much, but I know with Cake Pay there's like prepaid debit cards that you can use. So it's probably a lot of that. But even then, yeah, you're gonna have to like actively look for places probably that like exclusively support some kind of cryptocurrency. If you want like a hacky way to do it, which is I'm sure many would argue is not actually using cryptocurrency day to day, you'd have to get one of those like Visa debit cards that's linked to a cryptocurrency wallet. So you're kind of going through Visa and everything, but it's being funded by cryptocurrency, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's a good question though. It's not something I'm personally like trying to do, but I think it's an interesting concept, and I think that it's helpful. I've been using Cake Pay a lot though recently. It's kind of like a nice way to use just some funds here and there. So like if I want to buy something, there's this alarm clock that I'm too embarrassed to share what it is because it's too expensive. But like if there's something expensive that I can't justify the money on, it feels, because like my main form of transacting is not with cryptocurrency. If it comes from my cryptocurrency wallet, it doesn't feel like it costs anything, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just extra something.
Yeah.
It's not your main income, it's just there.
Yeah, it's just there. So that is like an area where I've been using it.
It's dangerous to get into that mindset though.
That's fair.
You'll end up spending a lot.
But also, like, I don't know. I think what I'm really annoyed about is the on and off ramps of cryptocurrency are really bad. if you're somebody who doesn't want to go through KYC. And so there's nothing else to do with the money outside just hold it in the wallet, unless you're going to like buy a gift card or something with it. And it's a way to like easily use it right there and then without needing to go through KYC. So that's been at least like because otherwise it just sits there and does nothing. And I don't think, I guess some people think that's what cryptocurrency is for. It's just sit and hold and make money. But I think that's not like the real goal of a lot of the people who care about the tech. They actually want to see it be utilized. So
I think that's certainly the case in like the Monero community. I don't know about any of the other cryptocurrencies. I think buying and holding might be the Bitcoin goal, to be honest.
Yeah, I do know Vic. So Vic's the CEO of Cake Wallet. He did make a post that went semi-viral on Twitter not too long ago. And it was like, it was pretty much calling out like you need to like actually spend Bitcoin. And he got a lot of pushback from people. It was like a lot of Bitcoiners who were like,
really?
I should be able to hold and not feel blah. And it's like, what's the point of a currency? Like at that point, it's just gold to you instead of like it being a cryptocurrency, you know, like it's supposed to be a currency. I don't know. This is a pretty open-ended question, and I'm not really quite sure. Like more specifics would be helpful, but Josh asks, what is your advice to someone who might want to use a completely separate pseudonym pen name to protect their legal information, and what steps can I take to further secure it? I feel like that's really broad, so I don't know like what exact issues you're having, but all I'll say is planning is everything. You really should like write down the name, what it's used for, what it's not used for, set up accounts for it, set up an email with that name, set up a phone number that's used for it. Like the more thorough you are with the planning, the easier it is to maintain it and secure it properly. So that's my personal advice as someone who has some aliases. Like planning is everything. Don't just wing it because it won't work out.
Yeah. From a legal perspective, I feel like that's going to vary so much on the region too.
That's fair.
I think your video about like buying a house anonymously that came out recently, probably a good watch for stuff like that. But
yeah, pseudonyms are legal for those wondering, but yeah, there's quite a bit of nuance to it. So
yeah,
definitely don't use it for fraud. And definitely if someone asks for a residential address, you probably need to be giving them legally a residential address. Otherwise, you're technically not legally okay. It was a good interview. I'm kind of annoyed it didn't perform very well because I think it's like a really it's an interview that people need to watch. And again, maybe it's the branding because the branding has like private home ownership and who owns homes anymore. But it applies for renting, like we talk about renting as well. So there's so much advice in there that applies to anybody. So
that's the type of content that I feel like will probably perform better over time. People will search for it.
I hope so.
Specifically looking for that.
I hope so. This is a good question from Alta. Will Chromium-based browsers like Brave not be able to support uBlock Origin in the future? Are they forced to adopt all changes Chromium pushes? That's a good question. I do think the longer that time goes on, the harder it's going to be for Brave to like continually maintain this. So Brave's doing it for now, but I guess we don't really know until a few years down the road if uBlock Origin will still have like, because I assume it won't, is my guess, unless they're able to like take the Firefox extension and repackage it to work on Chromium. Maybe that would work. But that's asking for a lot of at that point, I feel like Brave is just developing the extension for them.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to say. I think that Brave can maintain V2 support in their browser forever, but other extension developers are not going to make an extension just for Brave, probably, unless like way more people switch off of Chrome.
Right.
And Brave has their own store or something, but I think it's more likely that uBlock might just stop making a Chrome extension.
Yeah. How cross-compatible? Because I know now there's kind of a universal technology for extensions where you can develop an extension that works on Firefox and Chrome. Can someone just develop an extension for Firefox and then someone just installs it in Chrome? Or
it depends on the extension. There are the extensions are very similar nowadays. And they're both using the same like manifest v2, v3 format. I mean, the whole point of like the web extension standard was to make it easier to make cross-platform extensions. So it's largely very similar. sometimes there are browser-specific things that you'll have to do. So it might not always be one-to-one, but I think it's pretty easy.
Mm-hmm. Jonah, other Jonah Lowe asks, what are your thoughts on HardenedBSD and SELinux?
I mean, SELinux isn't that niche because it's enabled by default in like Fedora and stuff, and that's kind of the security that Red Hat and Fedora have been pushing on their distros. I think that it's a good change for sure. It's just kind of complicated, but it's the kind of thing that like I don't think a lot of people necessarily need to concern themselves about, like from a user perspective. A lot of these technologies are interesting things for like developers to implement, and I think that Fedora is going to be getting like better security defaults over time, but that's something for the Fedora developers to worry about. It's not something for most people to really care about, because Linux has perfectly adequate security as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Good Soul asked about my glasses. The answer is I've been wearing contacts for a few months. Eventually, I'll probably get LASIK, but I have to wait a few years.
Lasers.
Still. Yeah.
Pew, pew.
Exciting.
Crazy. Oh, I already got back to this. Like using cryptocurrency day to day. No specs. I've never heard classes called specs before. That's fun.
Specs? Spectacles?
Yeah. What's your advice to harden a Galaxy Fold phone to be private and collect less data because they can't use ROMs? I would probably push you towards our Android privacy and security guide on YouTube. We made device-specific guides, and that's probably pretty still relevant. They are due for an update, especially on the Apple side of things, because those videos are made before lockdown mode and advanced data protection and stuff like that. But I think the Android one should still be pretty relevant. So I think that's where I'd start. And yeah, that's what I'd suggest, I think. It's pretty complicated, and you're not going to have perfection, so don't expect perfection, but there's a lot that you can do on a phone, even if it's running, whatever crap Samsung has on it. Josh asks, when will Go Incognito V2 be released? So in the next few weeks, our new course platform should be going live. So Jonah's been working on like an open source self-hosted version, because right now we're using Teachable because it's the easiest thing to set up, and it handles billing, it handles user management and all that stuff, but we're moving over to like a self-hosted Moodle thing, and it looks really nice. And we've already been beta testing it internally, so some people on our forum already got access to it and sent us some feedback. So we're releasing that probably in the next few weeks. And then from there, it's kind of just getting the videos done for V2. So I don't want to give final deadlines, because in the first V1, I gave deadlines and I was way off on the deadlines, and I think that just caused people to be more frustrated. So I'm just going to say that, like, working as fast as I can on it, and it'll be done someday. But yes, you do get grandfathered in if you're on the first version. And just for clarification, they say subscriber. It's not a subscription. It's a one-time purchase. So it's a one-time purchase, and you get grandfathered into like the future iterations of the project. So.
They also asked, is there a good ecosystem to use and spend Monero, because normal currencies can be traced between chains? I think the Monero ecosystem is pretty large, and there's a lot of things like gift card payment systems, for example. You would know more about Monero stuff, but I think that the Monero ecosystem is certainly usable in my experience.
Yeah, I think it's just a question of where you're spending it. I mean, you can find a way to buy, like there's Proxy Store out there that I know you can like pretty much buy things like iVPN, Moldat subscriptions with Monero. And there's now XMR Bazaar, I believe is what's called. And it's like a Monero only Craigslist type of deal. So there's always these like cool things coming about. I do think that where pretty much any cryptocurrency falls apart though is when you actually have to use it day to day, like not in the digital sphere where you have your own ecosystem. So We talked about that earlier and kind of the challenges there, and that's where you're going to have to kind of use, I would say, like loose, like kind of, it's not like direct adoption, right? Like you're not actually giving someone Monero. Like when you use a like card that like behind the scenes might be funded with Bitcoin, that company's still getting fiat and they don't know that there's Bitcoin involved. So it's kind of just like a workaround way for you to do it, kind of like the gift cards route as well, where they don't know there's cryptocurrency involved. There's just a gift card that you're using. So I don't know if I said anything there. Did I say something there?
I think you answered the question. I mean, I kind of feel like maybe just because I'm exposed to Monero more than everything else, but I feel like Monero has a more of a usable ecosystem as far as like things to actually spend it on compared to most other. I mean, even maybe Bitcoin is accepted by some large companies, but I feel like I don't see a lot of people accepting Bitcoin day to day. Because I think a lot of people, like we were saying earlier, have a buy and hold mentality with a lot of other cryptocurrencies, and I don't really see that as much with Monero. Seems like people are into spending it because they like the idea that it's more like digital cash than anything else, which is kind of the point of it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think I definitely see Bitcoin more adopted than Monero because I mean I can pay for my internet with Bitcoin, which is crazy. But yeah, that's like a thing. I kind of randomly stumble on random places, and like I know it's not a common purchase for very many people at all, and not something that I would recommend to anybody. But like you could buy Tesla with Bitcoin and stuff. Like there are these random places that'll accept Bitcoin that are like more like I don't know, like Web3 friendly companies or whatever you want to call them. But I think Monero has more of that like grassroots adoption where like the services that Monero users want to use, there's probably a way to get it with Monero, which is like privacy respecting services, laptops, things like that. Like there's almost always a way to buy it with Monero directly, which is really cool. I really like the Monero community for that. Someone asked, I actually talked about this in our Signal group for our patrons. What do you think about iCloud Private Relay? Is it good enough if you use mostly Safari? So for people who don't know, on Apple devices, you can use Private Relay, which is essentially like a kind of a VPN on steroids, but it only works in Safari. So it's like a VPN that only applies to Safari and web traffic. So if you have a second browser on your phone, if you use Brave on your phone, on an iPhone, it won't go through this VPN. Here are my thoughts. I think that it's not a bad implementation. It's a pretty like upgraded version of a VPN in a lot of ways, and it's a very trustless model, all things considered. There are still some issues with it, but it's pretty solid. But honestly, it's probably a really good middle ground for a lot of people. A lot of people recently have been complaining about like certain apps on their phone that like block them from using their VPN. And so unless you're on Android and you can do split tunneling to exclude the app, you probably get the most benefit from a VPN in your web browser. That's because like the apps you have on your phone are probably trusted, and it's not a big deal whether or not you're using a VPN and hiding your IP address from those apps, because you manually installed these supposedly trusted apps onto your phone. But it's when you're web browsing where your IP address could actually be used to track you across the internet. So I think it's a cool workflow. I don't think that it being tied to an iCloud account is awesome, but I wish that there were more browsers that had like a browser-only VPN option that wasn't system-wide, because it's a really cool workflow that gives you probably like the best benefit with the least drawbacks. It's also just really smooth. You wouldn't know that iCloud Private Relay is even on. It's kind of just like going on behind the scenes. So those are kind of my thoughts on it. I wouldn't use Safari just for that feature alone, but it's a cool feature, I think. I don't know how you feel about it.
The only thing I would add, as far as your last point goes, is that it's very much a product that's meant for like literally anyone can use it, and as a result, it kind of the fail state of it kind of just falls back seamlessly to not being encrypted or connected, and sometimes it notifies you. I think it'll say like private relay isn't available on this network or whatever, and then it just stops working. So like it's not like a 100% reliable option as far as like compared to other VPNs with like kill switches to disconnect your internet if they're disconnected or that kind of thing. You don't have that guarantee necessarily with private relay.
Right. Yeah.
Just a warning.
Yeah, no, it's a good way to. It's not robust. I mean, frankly, everything on iOS, even a full VPN on iOS, you probably shouldn't trust and not leak traffic. because Apple still seems to think that not having a system-wide VPN is a good idea on iOS. But yeah, I think Private Relay's main target demographic is someone who, like, it's not the end of the world if their IP address is leaked on a website, but they want some of like the basic protections without like that many drawbacks. And I think that's what they accomplish pretty decently. But that's a good point too. I do get that pop up sometimes on different networks where it's like iCloud Private Relay not available on this network. But if you don't have that notification, then there's no way to really do anything about it. Josh asked, as a creator, do you have a system to make publishing to multiple platforms at once easier? Also, thoughts on Proton Docs, and have you switched yet? Yeah, so first, for people who don't know, there's a lot of platforms to manage when you run a project. Off the top of my head, there's YouTube. Fortunately, you know, a lot, I'll get to this, but we have YouTube, we have Odyssey, we have PeerTube, we have our blog, we have Twitter, we have Mastodon, we have Bluesky, we have, what else do we have? TikTok. As of recent, this was a difficult one to do, but as of recent, Facebook and Instagram. And so then there's the forum as well. And like trying to like manage all of them is a pain in the ass. So I'd say like the first thing is like automating as much as possible. So Odyssey and PeerTube I never open because it's just automatically synced from YouTube. So that's a way to just quickly automate some things. But recently, so I was using Buffer in the past, and Buffer is like a social media management tool that you can post to like 10 different platforms all at once, and you can schedule things in advance, and it has a content calendar. But Buffer has like a terrible pricing model. I know this is not something a lot of people think about, but it's like behind the scenes content stuff. But what they do is they charge per channel. So what this looks like is you can get 3 channels for free, and it's completely free to use Buffer for 3 channels, but then you add a 4th one and it's $6 per channel. So it goes from free to $24 a month just to have 4 channels linked. And then what happens when you get 10 channels on there is it ends up costing $60 a month, which I think is just kind of ridiculous. So I actually just found a new service a couple weeks ago called Social BU, and it's great. It's like $29 a month, and it has, I think, 12 channel connections as part of that plan. And then even their like more robust plan with over 30 connections is, I think, $50 a month. And for context, 30 plus connections on Buffer would probably cost you like 3 or 4 times that much. So Buffer just really, really gouges. Yeah. And then someone asked about Proton Docs. I've been using it for a few more things. It's not my daily driver, but I've been using Proton Docs more often, and I gotta say I am enjoying it quite a bit so far. I don't know, do you have thoughts on any of that?
Not really anything to add.
Okay.
I haven't used Proton Docs too much myself.
Okay.
Not a big Proton Drive user yet.
That's fair. It's not
Someday, maybe.
the greatest. Right now, my biggest issue is Proton Drive on desktop only supports like 1 account at a time. So
Yeah.
like I can only use it for 1 thing at any given time. But hopefully they add that because they just added multiple accounts for Proton Mail for desktop. So hopefully they'll carry that over.
Striker asked, do you recommend ESET for Linux, which is an antivirus?
Yeah, I was going to say, I've heard of that antivirus, but I didn't know if they had one for Linux or not.
They don't because it was discontinued. So there's that, first of all. Second of all, so no, I wouldn't. But also, I don't think you really need an antivirus on Linux. Maybe that'll be handy someday in the far future when there's more viruses on Linux. But most Linux antivirus products are, they're typically just like reskinned or rebranded Clam AV, which is an open source antivirus that's been around forever. And antivirus on Linux is the kind of thing where, like, if you have a Linux NAS, for example, and you have like 10 Windows computers connected to it, that antivirus might be useful because you might want to catch like Windows malware uploaded to your NAS before it gets spread to all the connected computers or something like that. But for like desktop personal use, antivirus doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's also not really that useful because even because for the reason I said earlier, a lot of connected Windows devices to Linux, that kind of thing, most antivirus products are looking for viruses for other operating systems and not even Linux specific viruses in the first place. So not a lot of value to doing that. I just would avoid any of that on Linux.
Yeah. Jonah has a good question here. Not you, Jonah, other Jonah.
JohnnyO.
Yeah. I guess I'll kind of rebrand the question a little bit. What's the newest update on data removal services? So for context, there was that Consumer Reports study that was put out that pretty much said that a majority of these data removal services aren't as effective as they claim to be. And then the services that performed the best was Optory and then Easy Opt-outs. Easy Opt-outs is like 20, 25 a month, something like that, really cheap. And then Optory is very expensive. And Optory then rolled out their AI feature, which pissed a lot of people off and made them move away from Optory. So it's just kind of this never-ending thing.
Yeah.
Is there an
and
update
to
on your
Optory's
end
credit,
before? Yeah.
I mean, Optory did roll back that feature to their credit, so there is that. They responded to the community, if that makes a difference for you. But um, separately over at Privacy Guides, I am testing some data broker removal services right now, and it's just, I can't really say anything about it because it is a long process because you have to actually wait for the data to be removed, which can take months in some cases. So it hasn't been that long yet, so it's still in progress. I do still think right now what I would recommend most people do, and this will probably still be the case a few months from now after we've finished like the final reviews of all these different services, but I think that easy opt-outs and then manually removing anything that's left over after that is probably going to be the best workflow for the vast majority of people in the US who are concerned about data brokers. So that's uh, that's where I'm at with that.
Yeah. And my initial, I guess, complaint slash criticism of easy opt-outs when we last talked about it is that there's not really like a public team. There's not much information about them. And it's kind of hard to like, I didn't feel as comfortable giving up my information to them. But since then, they have updated their website. They went on a podcast with, I forgot the channel's name, but they did do a podcast episode, and it was like really well done. And I've actually had a phone call with them, like the guys behind it, last week, which was really nice too. So, yeah, easy opt-out seems like it's probably going to be the way I go on my end. I know I've been indecisive on what to do coming from Delete Me. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I separately called them like a month or two ago and they seem like good people. It's just two people behind the whole
Yeah.
thing, and they have no plans to like expand or become a giant organization like Optory and have a bunch of staff or whatever. It's just going to be like a simple product that does what it says and not really anything else. And I think that's perfectly fine and exactly what most people need. So I think it's a pretty good, solid service.
Yeah.
Do open source software platforms like GitHub and F-Droid monitor the applications released on their platforms, or is it up to the public to review the code and confirm its safety? Asks Good Soul. And no, there is no review process. Like any hosting platform, they accept like abuse reports. So like if malware gets uploaded, people can report it and it gets taken down. It's not going to like stay up if they know about it, but nobody's actively like auditing all of these projects on GitHub or whatever. F-Droid, on the other hand, does do more manual reviews, and they like build all the apps and they monitor changes like each app maintainer. So there is more of a review process on F-Droid for sure, but on just code repositories like GitHub, not really.
Josh asked, are there some ways you ethically promote companies and do ads and stuff for revenue in an ethical and privacy respecting way? Yeah, it's a really broad question. I think it depends where. Generally, unless we specifically say something is sponsored, it's not, I don't see it as promotion. Like one of the biggest criticisms we see is that we're really critical of things. And it's like, yeah, because it's not just a promoted, like there's no reviews that we do that are sponsored or anything like that. So when I do a review, it's normally because I actually used it myself, and here are my thoughts on it. So I just put out that Kaji review recently. I reached out to Kaji for a review account, and they said no. I don't know why. I think that's silly. I think, giving like a $5 plan for somebody to review it and give them thousands of eyeballs seems like a no-brainer to me. I wouldn't do that myself. But like I normally reach out and just say, hey, it's just a budgeting thing. If we have to pay for every review unit on our ends, it just tends to add up. So it's really helpful when services actually cover the cost for us. But yeah, the only way that we like ever promote companies and do ads is when we do a sponsor segment or we do something that's very clearly disclosed as a like promoted thing. And in that case, we have all these guidelines on our website. So we have sponsorship guidelines, affiliate guidelines. And yeah, it's taken a lot of time. There's a lot of community feedback that went into those. And I'm pretty happy with the sponsors that we have. And it sucks because we have to pass up like good money every day because we get like really cool offers almost every day from a lot of different companies that sponsor a lot of other YouTubers that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. But yeah, we just try to stick with like more ethical companies, and I think we do pass up on quite a bit of like not every Techlore video is sponsored, and that's
and
why.
they could be if you
be.
took every sponsorship for sure.
Exactly. So it's kind of just like picking and choosing like how to like promote things in a way that like aligns with what the community wants. So I think that's kind of been our approach at least. But it's tempting to not always do that because again, like I think we could do a lot more things if we were able to get like the sponsors we want that like I'm just really grateful for sponsors like NotSure, for example, or we had Ente previously as well. Like those are just good quality projects that like are open source, are very like grassroots, and it's so easy to take them as sponsors, I feel.
Yeah. And I would just add, I would plug our forum sponsorship, which I think is really nice. And NotesNook is our current forum sponsor right now, but we have 2 slots, but we just do like a simple image on every page and don't have to do anything super invasive as far as like advertising or anything crazy that other websites do.
Yeah, so you'll see like I have it up on the live stream. We have like a second spot here for a forum sponsor. So if you know a project or if you run a project that you think would be good, we get a lot of page views on the forum. And it's a way to like target people in like a billboard fashion, which doesn't involve tracking by default. So yeah. Sorry, I'm so low energy. I am not disinterested in these questions. I'm just dying. Like my head is just like feels like it's gonna explode. Like this emoji right here, this exploding head is how I feel right now.
That's how you feel.
Yeah.
I mean, this stream has gone on a little while now.
It's been over 2 hours. That's true. All right, let's wrap these up. Do you know who I am? LOL. No.
Were you able to live off of Techlore full-time before joining Cakewallet? And if so, what made you want to join Cakewallet as an employee?
Yeah, it's a fun question. Yeah, like Techlore has been outside of things like I did an internship with StartPage, and I've done like random side gigs. I did some coaching, but like none of those pay very much. So yeah, for the last decade, Techlore has been like my full-time job. For me, going with Cakewallet was like trying something new, dipping my toes in a company that I really enjoyed, because Cakewallet's something I've used personally for years now, and like it's a service that we've recommended on Techlore for so long. And I felt like I could provide a lot of good value for the company. And Vic really wanted me on the team, and I was like, sure, I'll give it a shot. And I was really excited about it, and I've really enjoyed it so far. And it's nice to like have the overlap. There's a lot of things I've already learned working for Cakewallet that I've applied to Techlore and vice versa. So it's just been a really great experience. So I don't know. Yeah, a lot of people I know too in my life were like, it's, you've been doing the same thing for a long time, like take a risk, try something new. And then, yeah, so that's kind of where it's been. And I've been really enjoying it so far. I feel like I'm talking in circles now, but it's been a lot of fun. And
Cool.
one cool thing is it allows me to take more risks on Techlore, because now that I have, something else that, helps me like pay for bills and takes care of that, I feel like I can take more risks with Techlore and do like cooler things and make content I wouldn't have wanted to make before. Which I don't know why I wouldn't. It's harder to do things and be risky when it's like your source of income, your sole source of income. So that's been another like weird side effect. So
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, sorry guys, we're not getting back to every question, but we're trying to pick out our favorites here, because otherwise we'd be here for another 2 hours. Yeah, Good Soul said, really enjoying the live, but it feels like YouTube chat questions are getting left behind. I don't know if it's your first stream, but yeah, the way we do these is we start with like patrons, Techlorians, and then we do the forum, and then we go into the live chat like we have been. So that's typically the order of operations. It's tough, of course, because we want to get back to everybody's questions like all at once, but that's just how we...
There's a lot of questions.
Yeah, there's a ton. I mean, if you go back and rewind this, Jordan's our editor, and they're incredible, because they go in after we're done streaming, and they're the ones that put the timestamps.
Timestamp
So
it
when you
all,
see timestamps on this in a few hours after it goes live, you have Jordan to thank for that. Oh yeah, have you I mean, I guess we covered earlier that we're not like daily driving Fedora, but I did see Fedora 41 was released. I feel like Fedora updates are happening like overnight now. Like I feel like 38 was just released.
I think it's a pretty set schedule, but they do release pretty quickly, which is kind of the point of using it. I like on Cubes, I upgraded to Fedora 41, but on Cubes, none of the Fedora updates have ever really made a difference to my experience, because it's not like changes to GNOME or whatever. Or I'm not going to see that in Cubes, so it doesn't really affect my life too much, these updates.
What do you use for like your, like if you were to use Fedora, would you use GNOME?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I like GNOME.
Well, I mean, I guess I do like KDE on the Steam Deck. So I would consider it, but I don't know. I do like GNOME, so.
So
they're all fine.
Yeah, I know. It's.
I just adapt to whatever, I don't need a specific layout. I just adapt to whatever's in front of me.
Yeah, so Josh said Social Blue looks great. I hope they support security keys or TOTP auth. They do not, so that is one downside. Very big shortcoming. I've complained to them quite a bit over email now about it. So yeah, I'm not going to be unhinged and recommend our audience bugs other projects for my own purposes, but I do think that like they really should have them.
Definitely don't do that.
Yeah.
I will say, with good password manager hygiene,
you're probably fine.
The benefit of like TOTP 2FA is not that much more than just using like a unique password that's random and secure. Passkeys would have actual more security, but
I think
I'm pretty comfortable with unique passwords on a non-TOTP app in most cases, to be honest.
I think the issue in this case with something like Social Boo is it can post to like 10 different, social accounts in one place. So it's higher stakes. Yeah.
And they say, yeah, but it feels good to have 2FA even though all my passwords. I mean, yeah, it also just, it feels better, and that's important. But whether it's actually better, it's not. I don't think it's a huge difference.
Right. But no, it's actually something I'm complaining about a lot right now because it's pretty bad. So I fully agree with you. And if you do use it, just know that is a risk. And not one I normally take, but I'm pretty desperate for something. If you've tried managing 10 social accounts, all at once, it's a nightmare, like a complete nightmare. So a tool like this is really needed, and Buffer is just way too expensive. I think we were paying like $70, $80 a month for Buffer, and it was just a joke. I don't know how they stay in business, frankly, with that kind of pricing. We got a super chat, which I'm really excited about. So Bahumbra, I appreciate answering my question. Love everything you guys do. I do sysadmin for a local government, and privacy is often seen as the enemy. LOL. Yeah, well, that's good to have people like on the inside that do care about it, though. So I'm sure you're part of like the positive change that can happen. Yeah, super cool. And thanks for the super chat, of course. And yeah, I'm glad that you like what we do. And I wish I had more energy to get like just really hyped for this, because I am really hyped, and I'm gonna be really excited about that comment. But I'm slowly. Yeah, before I was in bed, and Jonah, I asked Jonah, hey, call me like 25 minutes before the live stream if I if I haven't responded, because I'm gonna take a quick nap. Dude, those vaccines knock you hard, man.
Yeah, they're pretty crazy.
They're so casual about it. They're like, oh, you're already here. Like, you want to just get up to date on your vaccinations? And I go, yeah, why not? I don't want to come back to this place. And they did it on a Tuesday, and now my Wednesday is a nightmare because of it. So
well, maybe we should think about wrapping this up then. It has been
a while.
Almost 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, and I'm gonna nap. Last night was rough, dude. I was up. I said this already to you in Signal, but like I really wanted to throw up because my stomach was so upset, and like for a whole hour I just couldn't overnight. So it wasn't
yikes. You're really not selling this vaccine, I gotta say.
I don't need to sell it. It's its own thing. But yeah, I'm feeling better though. I think that I was feeling pretty bad last night. But anyway, let's start wrapping this up. I want to go through all the thank yous because there's a lot of them to give. These live streams take a lot more than just us two to like make happen. I want to thank Jordan for sending us stories and having us like talk about those at the beginning. I want to thank all of our patrons and Techlorians. You guys all like quite literally allow us to be independent and do things like we were saying earlier, like not sponsor every video. And we're very picky with our sponsors, and it's because we have such a diverse source of income that comes from a lot of you as well. I want to thank people on XMR chat who sent us tips. I want to thank Bonhumbra, who sent us this tip here on YouTube. And I want to thank you all for asking questions. We literally, like, that is this content for us. Like, we answer your questions and you guys leave the questions. And so we have no one to thank but you guys for doing all of that. Especially Josh. Yeah, Josh, you left a lot of questions today and there were a lot of good ones. So it was really appreciated. And of course, thank you, Jonah, for being here and helping out in a lot of the areas where I'm less savvy, and hopefully vice versa here and there. That's all I got.
Yeah, excellent time as always.
Yeah. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next month. Again, join Patreon or become a Techlorian on our forum to get priority next month and have your question answered right there at the beginning of the stream. Till next month, see you, Jonah. See you, everyone. And I'll stop rambling.